Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of August. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Cameron Walker.
Keir Starmer responds to calls to clamp down on social media following the nationwide riots. He warns the public that the online world is not a law-free zone. Could there be a threat to free speech?
And a divided Britain. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, declares he no longer feels safe as a Muslim in London with the ongoing unrest.
And rioters out early. Ministers are changing the law to allow some criminals to leave prison early to tackle the overcrowding crisis. So some who were jailed for the riots, could they be released early?
And migrants' numbers fall. Applications for skilled worker, health and care and student visas to come down in the UK by more than a third compared with last year. Will Labour benefit from changes made by the Conservatives?
And an urgent manhunt for a man described as a violent mental health patient and a risk to women after he absconds from a care facility, reportedly for the 4th time. Well, a lot on our plate today, a lot on the menu for this show anyway. Just hearing from Keir Starmer there, he seems to be doing these daily Q&As with the press, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he was asked about some comments by Sadiq Khan. Now, we know Sadiq Khan has come out and said that he doesn't feel safe as a Muslim in this country in light of the recent disorder. But also, he said, Sadiq Khan did, that we need a crackdown on social media. The regulations, as they are, aren't working in his view. Keir Starmer was asked this.
Yes, he certainly was. He was at a control centre for the Met Police today, the Prime Minister, and this, of course, comes in the last 24 hours. A 55-year-old woman has been arrested in relation to social media posts containing inaccurate information. But, of course, it's a very slippery slope, isn't it? Where is the line? Where do you draw the line? And I think there's also an issue, perhaps, with education, maybe, around social media use, what perhaps is acceptable or unacceptable to post. And sometimes people would put something in very good faith on social media that is inaccurate, but they don't mean it to be. Could that make you end up, being locked up by the police?
There's a real murky waters out there when it comes to social media. At the moment, pretty much you can post whatever you like on Twitter. But what exactly are the rules? We want to dig into what exactly that means. Are you worried that we could see a bit of an authoritarian clampdown on Twitter? Or are you pleased to see that actually the government is thinking about the online world almost in the same way as they might feel about real life? You know, Keir Starmer continues to say that if you commit a crime online, it is just as bad as if you were involved in the violent disorder yourself. So please do get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so.
And Mark White has your latest news headlines.
Good morning, it's 3 minutes past 12. Good afternoon even. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. The Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences expected to be handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable.
Those that are thinking about getting involved in disorder of any sort is very clear. If you involve yourself in disorder, then the full force of the law will be applied. And the fact that we've seen this week people not just in court but being sentenced to significant terms of custody for their behaviour just a few days ago, I think is a very important message to anyone who's thinking of getting involved in the coming days.
Well, several police forces have issued further CCTV appeals to identify suspects they believe to have been responsible for some of the violence and disorder. Detectives investigating riots in Merseyside issued images of 11 people after a separate appeal helped identify individuals earlier this week. Greater Manchester Police have issued a similar appeal for information. They're asking the public to contact them directly. Alternatively, they can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously if they recognise any of the people pictured. And the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has claimed he doesn't feel safe as an openly Muslim politician following the riots. Asked by reporters if he felt at risk during the riots, given his religion, he said clearly, "I'm not safe, which is why I've got police protection." The mayor expressed alarm at recent events, comparing them to the racial tensions he faced growing up in the 1970s and 80s. The family of a retired British doctor have issued an urgent appeal after he went missing in the French Pyrenees almost 3 days ago. 67-year-old Tom Doherty from St Albans was hiking and camping near Col d'Escaut when his family lost contact with him on Tuesday. A search is underway involving dogs and helicopters. His daughter says the family last heard from Dr. Doherty via WhatsApp. He sent them messages asking for help and told them he'd fallen and couldn't move. Donald Trump has agreed to debate Vice President Kamala Harris on television in the race to the White House. It's been confirmed the Republican nominee will debate his Democratic rival on the 10th of September on the US network ABC. And Trump told a news conference at his Florida home last night that he also wants to add 2 more debates on Fox News and NBC. During his conference, Mr. Trump claimed his opponent wasn't intellectually up to the challenge.
Any news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference. And I'm sorry, we need smart people to lead this country because our country's never been in this danger before, both economically and from an outside perspective. Russia doesn't respect us anymore. China doesn't respect us anymore. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, liked me a lot. He doesn't like this group.
Russia's defence ministry has confirmed that reserve forces are being sent to the country's western Kursk region, where it still hasn't gained control after a cross-border offensive by Ukrainian troops. Moscow claims Ukraine lost more than 280 military personnel in the past 24 hours, a claim that has not been independently verified. Reports suggest that Ukrainian troops are operating more than 6 miles inside Russia, the deepest cross-border advance by Kyiv since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. Empty shops and restaurants are being used by organised crime groups for large-scale cannabis growing operations, according to the National Police Chiefs Council. The NPCC said empty pubs, office buildings, cafes and nightclubs have also been targeted by the gangs. More than 3,000 cannabis plants with an estimated value of £2 million were grown in a former department store in Newport in South Wales before it was raided by Gwent police recently. The former reality TV star Katy Price is due to appear in court this afternoon after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and again in March this year. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 12 and we have some breaking news for you regarding the former BBC presenter Huw Edwards. He has been asked to return the salary paid to him since he was arrested back in November last year. The BBC says he undermined trust in them. We'll be keeping you updated on that. There's a very long statement from the BBC in which they say if Huw Edwards had been upfront when asked by the BBC about his arrest, they would never have continued to pay him public money. Of course, Huw Edwards pleaded guilty last Wednesday to making indecent images of children.
Yes, very interesting indeed. So we're going to bring you some more on that. The statement released from the BBC. They say essentially that he has clearly undermined trust in the BBC, brought us into disrepute. They remain concerned about the potential for inappropriate workplace behaviour, particularly in creative and editorial environments, certainly reflecting on what went wrong at the BBC. But there you go. That is the breaking line for you, that he has been asked to repay that salary paid since he was arrested.
Absolutely. Well, moving on now, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has told the police to stay on high alert as he held another crucial Cobra meeting last night. This comes as the nation recovers from a week of riots that's seen more than 150 people charged in relation to the disorder, as well as for comments made on social media. And with the football season returning, Starmer has this to say earlier.
I think there are a lot of things in the mix this weekend. But, of course, whatever the challenge, we have to rise to it. And that's why I've had Cobra meetings. That's why I've been talking to the police today about their plans for the weekend. Yes, football is added into the mix. There are other things in the mix. But our focus has to be absolutely solely on the safety and security of our communities. And that's exactly where it is.
Interesting response there. He was also asked about whether the online safety bill is still fit for purpose. This was Starmer's response.
In relation to online and social media, the first thing I'd say is this is not a law-free zone. And I think that's clear from the prosecutions and sentencing. Today we're due sentencing for online behaviour. That's a reminder to everyone that whether you're directly involved or whether you're remotely involved, you're culpable and you will be put before the courts if you've broken the law.
Well, GB News political editor Chris Hope joins us now. Chris, thank you for joining us. Sir Keir Starmer seems pretty confident that all of these, all the things he is doing is acting as a deterrent for the rioters.
Yeah, he does. And hi, Cameron. Hi, Emily. He does indeed think that. And I think, you know, we have seen the riots peter out through this week. The last 2 nights have been thankfully peaceful. We are seeing sentencing being carried out, swift justice, if you like, since the riots started last week after those dreadful killings of 3 small children in Southport. You heard there from Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. He's been meeting with Sir Mark Rowley, who's the Met Police Commissioner, and one of his deputies, Andy Valentine, and seeing how the police are operating, looking closely at CCTV. That's often how police move in after policing events. If they don't go into arrest, they use CCTV afterwards to round up wrongdoers. And he had this to say about this weekend.
I think it's really important that we maintain high alert. I've obviously been here at the control room of the Met looking at what's essentially the nerve centre, but my message to the police and all of those that are charged with responding to disorder is maintain that high alert. I'm absolutely convinced that having the police officers in place these last few days in the right places, the swift justice that's being dispensed in our courts have had a real impact. But we have to stay on high alert going into this weekend because we absolutely have to make sure that our communities are safe and secure and feel safe and secure.
And there we have it, high alert this weekend from Sir Keir Starmer. We will be seeing some sentencing later, I think, from people involved on Twitter. And that is interesting, I think, because people like Elon Musk have been critical of the UK government cracking down on use of social media, making remarks which may have inflamed some of the riots. Sir Keir Starmer said today that social media is not a law-free zone. He said, if you're directly involved or whether you're indirectly involved, indeed, you are culpable and you'll be put before the courts if you've broken the law. So I think a real warning for anybody on social media or directly involved in rioting that they are going to come for you if they can.
Yeah, we're going to have a discussion about that a little later on, actually, Christopher, because I think there's some confusion about what exactly the law is around online behaviour and posts and whether retweeting something could get you banged up and the like. But there's so much to get through. I wonder if you can comment on whether there's been a bit of mixed messaging coming from the government versus the police. Mark Rowley yesterday appeared to praise those who came out and showed a united front on the streets of London against the far-right thugs. But we've heard from a cabinet minister this morning, haven't we, who said actually people shouldn't be doing that. People should stay at home to avoid putting pressure on the police.
Yes, that's right. Well, that was the response to Mark Rowley when you had those counter demonstrations turning out in force across the country, really, on Wednesday night, and there was no demonstrations by whether the far right or not by people concerned about migration and the rest. They weren't there opposing them, and that was praised by Mark Rowley. I think it's right that, frankly, everyone should just dial it down. That was Nick Thomas-Simmons, of course, on GBNews earlier today. I should say also that on my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, out today on all good podcast platforms, we've heard from Craig McKinley, now Lord McKinley, a former Tory MP, of course, lost both arms and both legs to sepsis. And he tried to talk about a degree of nuance about those on protests. He said, quite interestingly, that there's always going to be some nutters and they should be dealt with very robustly by the law, should go to prison if appropriate. He's fully in favour of that. But he said this, but if you look at some of these rallies that are going on, there are lots of couples on these rallies that you'd expect to see in the Dog and Duck, in the pub on a Friday afternoon. They're normal people. And this idea, I think, that not everybody who involved in these demonstrations are the far right is quite important, I think, certainly to GBNews viewers and listeners, judging by our online mailbox. I think that idea may be something which the government is getting to grips with now.
Yeah, Chris, the Telegraph reporting this morning that the far-right rioters that have been jailed could be released early from prison under the Labour government's own scheme to tackle overcrowding in prisons.
Yeah. Well, Cameron, and that of course is correct, because so far we've seen jail terms of 3 years, 30 months, 20 months, and all those fall below the 4-year threshold. The rules are that the government's going to start releasing prisoners after they serve 40%, not 50% of their tariff as soon as next month. Thousands of criminals to be released early from jail. The exemptions are sex offenders, domestic abusers and violent offenders serving over 4 years. But as I said, those rioters have been sentenced to less than 4 years, 3 years, 30 months, 20 months. And they will then, on the face of it, qualify for early release. So we have many things happening at the same time here. The government and the courts are arresting, charging and sentencing within a few days, which is very, very unusual to show it a deterrent to rioters. But the truth is the policy is to release many of these rioters, according to the government's own plans, early after only serving 40%, not 50% of their term.
Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor there outside number 10. Thank you. Now, in other news, police have launched an urgent manhunt to find a violent mental health patient who's escaped from a care facility, reportedly for the 4th time.
Well, GB News national reporter Charlie Peters joins us now in the studio. Charlie, what more do we know about this?
His name is Balasanka Narayanan. He's 44 years old. He was last seen on Sunday, the 4th of August at 6:40 p.m. So this is already quite a long-going missing persons case of this man who, as you said, has been previously escaped 3 times. First in the October of 2021 and then twice in 2023, June and September, all from the same facility in Ilford. I've looked at it. It's a converted residential home on a normal residential street. In this house, quite small. It's a small private facility. It's understood that he was on an escorted walk with staff from that facility at a park nearby in Ilford and then took an opportunity to escape. We don't know if the same mode of escape was used in the reported 3 previous instances, but that's how the police are saying he escaped at the time. Now, he's said to be a violent mental health patient and a risk to women, and also quite unnervingly, he has links across London, so locating him could be particularly difficult. He's been listed as having links in both Hammersmith, Highgate and also Ilford, where he's escaped from. He's also said to have links in the Greater Manchester area and could be seen on national rail transport. The facility he's escaped from is right next to a national rail station in Ilford, Seven Kings, also on the Elizabeth line, so could get very far very quickly. But as I said, this last seen on Sunday, the 4th of August at 6:40, quite a long time to have passed since the Met are now putting out this appeal.
Yeah, very worrying that it's taken this long for a police appeal to be put out. Presumably they were hoping they'd be able to find him easily, but perhaps this is now, as you say, links over London, but also across the country. This could be a nationwide search now for someone who is a threat, a menace to women.
Yeah, and being from a mental health facility makes it particularly concerning, not only due to the, excuse me, potential differences in behaviour you might anticipate from someone under that level of treatment, but also the sort of supervision they might be under. Now, mental health facilities, especially on residential roads, obviously their first mentality is not detention. These are not like prisons, and so the opportunities to escape, you can presume, are much greater. We have also seen several other escaped people who are being held by mental health facilities in London this year. There was an escape from Springfield Hospital in southwest London. That went on for several days. 2 men escaped from that facility. Also another in Homerton in East London earlier this year, a convicted killer who escaped for 4 days, later detained after a 4-day search by the Met. So this is a consistent issue, and it does point to the fact that these facilities are easier to leave from than prisons.
I mean, it does beg the question, if someone is considered violent and a risk to women, why he was potentially, you know, free to go on this escorted trip to a public park.
Yeah, many questions for this private care facility. They've been contacted for comment, not releasing any statement at this time, but just looking at the kind of observations from maps and sort of images you can see of the area. It is a normal, quiet, residential part of North London. It's right next to a park, it's right next to a train station.
Charlie, just very quickly, the police, he absconded on Sunday, the 4th of August. The police put out an appeal this morning. What does this suggest about what they're doing to try and find this guy, that it's such a lag between the appeal going out and him absconding.
Well, in the previous times when he is reported to have absconded, sometimes the appeal was the next day, and sometimes the appeal was a few days after. So when the appeal's immediate, it's probably because they've lost track of him. They've not been able to put in a definite trace. And it also points to the wide ranges of potential locations that Balasanka Narayanan, that 44-year-old who is on the run at the moment from the Met and that private care facility, could be in. Links, like I said, Hammersmith, Greenford, Ilford, Highgate in North London, but also Greater Manchester, and known to use National Rail. The long gap here, a 5-day gap between escape to appeal, does suggest that the Met now don't know where he is.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie Peters. Please do bring us any updates. Hopefully the police can track him down sooner rather than later if he is indeed a menace to women.
Absolutely. Well, ministers are changing the law to allow some criminals to leave prison early to tackle overcrowding crisis. So some who were jailed for the riot could be released early. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A lot of people will be saying 22%, inflation's 2%. This is inflation busting. It's a massive pay rise with £2.7 trillion in national debt and rising. This costs £1 billion a year, £5 billion over the term of the Labour government. Why on earth do junior doctors deserve it?
Junior doctors have been overworked and underpaid for many years now. And in the UK, good health in our population is the bedrock for getting the UK economy growing again back to its best. So we need an NHS that's able to deliver elective care for our parents, operations, A&E service when our children need it. And that means we need doctors in our hospitals paid fairly, motivated to be there, rather than leaving for Australia, which many of my colleagues have been doing throughout the year that I've been working. So I think we need to invest in our health service. This is a crucial first step to do so.
What about the notion that a lot of people are saying, wow, hey presto, as if by magic, this has been resolved 5 minutes into a Labour term. Is there a political element to this? Were the junior doctors and the unions simply unprepared to negotiate with the Conservatives, and as soon as Labour get in, wallop, it's a done deal?
I think there were really genuine frustrations felt by junior doctors over recent years, exhaustion off the back of COVID and previously, but also the sense that pay wasn't keeping up with cost of living. And this is the first pay deal that listens to those concerns seriously, that embeds a pay rise that considers that, but also that talks about other concerns. So rotational training around the country that took where people live out of their control, sending people off to Plymouth with a few weeks' notice. I think that this deal puts staff wellbeing first and therefore puts our patients' wellbeing first as well.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, a very good afternoon to you. It's 12:26. Now, as Labour crack down on violent disorder, will the rioters they've just jailed be released early?
Reports suggest protesters jailed for less than 4 years could benefit from the government's plans to deal with overcrowding in prisons.
Yes, but the Ministry of Justice does say that 500 new prison cells have been made available and are waiting for anyone involved in what they're calling thuggery. So yes, what is the deal? Will they be let out early, essentially, is what we're asking. We're joined by retired prison governor Vanessa Frake-Harris to try and help us make sense of this all. Vanessa, there's a difficulty here, isn't there? Because the government are cracking down robustly and the criminal justice system is working very swiftly. Vanessa, we know that some of these people have already been given sentences of up to 3 years. I think that's the longest one that we've seen so far dished out. But then we've also got this early release scheme. So potentially could there be that some of these rioters that have just been banged up could be some of those allowed out early?
Good afternoon to you both. Well, yes, unfortunately, they are going to meet the criteria. Anybody receiving a determinate sentence of less than 4 years will meet the criteria for the early release. There are a couple of exceptions. One is if any of them are charged with arson, they won't meet the criteria, or indeed terrorism. And I don't believe as yet anybody has been charged with that. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit farcical, really. But I think what we must remember is that although these prisoners will be released early, they will still be on licence and subject to conditions of that licence, whether that be not to go to certain places, curfews, not to contact victims, etc., etc. There are many conditions you can put on a licence. And if they fail to make any of those conditions on their licence, they can be had their collar felt and land themselves back in jail to finish their whole sentence and indeed be charged with any other criminal activity if warranted.
Vanessa, even if some of these rioters are indeed released early from prison, is there an argument that the fact that they have been convicted and put in prison in the first place is actually punishment enough for their crimes?
Well, I mean, you could look at it like that, I suppose. I think it's important that, you know, if we're going to have a rule, then it has to be a rule for everybody. I don't think that we can suddenly say that, you know, anybody involved in the disturbances doesn't fit that criteria. If they do fit that criteria, then I think we've got to adhere to it. But obviously, I would expect that their licences upon release will have very strict conditions on it.
Now, I don't know if you have a view on this, Vanessa, but I'll try. There's been quite a lot of talk about whether some of these rioters or people that have been involved in the violent disorder should be banned from football stadiums. This is something that the Prime Minister was asked about this morning. He didn't really give a straight answer. He said it's just one of the considerations that the police will have this weekend because they're examining links between football hooliganism and this type of far-right thuggery that we saw on the streets. Vanessa, is there sometimes a link between these two in your experience?
I think there is. I think there's a link with a lot of things about you know, the riots that have gone on that need to be looked at quite closely. You know, I'm an avid football supporter myself. I go to matches as often as I can. You know, I wouldn't want to see any of the what we've seen on our streets happen at football matches. You know, we've gone past that. We don't want to go full circle and come back to, you know, thuggery in football, as far as I'm concerned. You know, if that was a condition of their licence, then fine, albeit great.
Yes, I think many of our viewers, thinking more generally now about prisoners and only serving 40% of their sentences, may argue that that's kind of too lenient. You look to sentences passed in the United States, for example, where people are put in prison for literally decades for perhaps smaller or lesser crimes. But here in the UK, 40% of sentences seems to be a bit of a norm in certain cases.
Well, I think you have to look at what's happened to our prison system over the past sort of 15 years. You know, year on year, the prison service has been drained of funding. And, you know, nobody's wanted to address it. We've banged on about it for years, about the overcrowding crisis. You know, Labour had an early release scheme in 2008 to 2010. They released around 81,000 prisoners on an early release scheme because the prisons were full then. But still nothing was done about it. And, you know, 10, 15 years later, we're in the same boat again. And to be honest, we can't have, and I think if you look back at some of my quotes on this programme a couple of months ago, I said, We cannot have a position where if we have major disturbances in our country that we can't lock people up. And lo and behold, I mean, you know, we're where we are today. And I think that the early release scheme is the only quick solution that we can. It's not ideal, absolutely not. And, you know, victims of crime will. That's who we need to consider.
Vanessa, just very quickly, because we're running out of time. Just Vanessa, do we have room in our prisons for people to be put in jail for inflammatory social media posts?
Well, it depends how inflammatory they're seen to be, I suppose. You know, anybody who incites anybody to violence, in my opinion, deserves to be locked up. And I think I'll leave it there.
OK, leave it there. Vanessa Frake-Harris, thank you very much indeed. You're a retired prison governor. Thank you very much.
Right, lots more still to come. But first, here's your news headlines with Mark White.
Yes, good afternoon. It's 12:32. The main headlines from the GB News Centre. Disgraced former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. Well, some breaking news, and the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that 150 of the people arrested in connection with this month's violent disorder have already appeared in court. 118 of those have now been remanded in custody. More than 500 prison places are also being brought online to boost prison capacity. Well, this comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences expected to be handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable. An 18-year-old Iraqi national has been arrested in Vienna in connection with the investigation into an alleged plot to attack a Taylor Swift concert in the Austrian capital. On Wednesday, all 3 of the US singer's performances at Vienna's Ernst Happel Stadium were cancelled, and 2 other suspected extremists were arrested by local police. The Iraqi national arrested is believed to have come from the same group as the main suspect, a 19-year-old Austrian with North Macedonian roots. The family of a retired British doctor have issued an urgent appeal after he went missing in the French Pyrenees almost 3 days ago. 67-year-old Tom Doherty from St Albans was hiking and camping near Col d'Escaut when his family lost contact with him on Tuesday. A search is underway involving dogs and helicopters. His daughter says the family last heard from Dr. Doherty via WhatsApp. He sent them messages asking for help and told them he'd fallen and couldn't move. The former reality TV star Katy Price is due to appear in court this afternoon after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and again in March this year. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. There will be some hot weather pushing into parts of the southeast later this weekend, but for the time being, there'll be some sunny spells in which it's going to feel relatively warm today. That being said, it was a bit cloudy and a little bit damp for some of us first thing. That's because of a front that is now clearing away towards the east, taking that cloud and any rain with it. So across many parts of England and Wales, it's looking dry through this afternoon. Some bright sunny spells, just 1 or 2 showers here. More frequent showers across parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too. Some of them on their heavy side and some blustery winds here, so those showers rattling through quite quickly. In the north, it's going to feel a little fresh for the time of year, especially with those winds, but elsewhere, feeling warm in those sunny spells. Later on, we'll have more showers across parts of Scotland, still quite blustery here. Elsewhere through this evening and the start of the night, largely dry with some clear skies. But overnight, we are going to have some cloud pushing its way in and some rain feeding into parts of Western England and Wales. A relatively fresh night for eastern parts where we hold on to those clearer skies, milder where it turns cloudier. Through tomorrow then, a bit of a cloudy day across many parts of England and Wales, and there will be some wet weather around. The heaviest rain will be for western hills over parts of Wales and southwest England perhaps. Further north for Scotland and Northern Ireland, similar to today really. Lots of showers around and it is going to be quite blustery. Temperatures will be rising, mid-20s towards the south, but not necessarily feeling that warm because of the thicker cloud. Now, as we go into Sunday, and it does now look a little bit cloudier than it did before, particularly across some parts of central southern England and Wales, and there could be 1 or 2 spots of rain. A bit more sunshine, though, further north over northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and perhaps some sunshine developing across the far south of England as well. But with that, we have some hotter air pushing its way in. So even though there may be a bit of cloud around, temperatures should get into the high 20s. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In East Lothian, the A6093 is closed near Ormiston because of a burst water main. On the M16 Greater Manchester, there's a lane closed clockwise where a vehicle caught fire between junctions 4 and 5 from the M56 to the Princess Parkway, with delays from junction 1 at Stockport. On the M1 in Derbyshire, there's a lane closed southbound where a car caught fire between junctions 29 and 28 near Mansfield. It's taking 20 minutes in the queues. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound after an accident between junctions 4A and 5 from the M42 to Droitwich, taking around an hour in the delays towards there. In Cambridgeshire, the A14's partly blocked eastbound just before junction 20 at Ellington, west of Huntingdon. The queues from junction 16 at Kimbolton. In London, Baker Street in Marylebone's blocked where they're dealing with a fire, and train services are suspended between Marylebone and both Aylesbury Vale Parkway and West Ruislip because of an incident.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Right, well, welcome back. Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:39 and we've got some good news to bring you. Another gold for Team GB.
Yes. Congratulations to Toby Roberts. He has won the gold in the men's boulder and lead competition. That's essentially climbing. 155.2 points, beating his Japanese rival, and he's 19 years old. So what an achievement. Yet another gold for Team GB.
Just 19, just a baby.
Yeah.
Just a baby.
Wonderful news.
Boulder and lead. I've never heard of that before, but that's, you know, that's the magic of the Olympics, isn't it? You discover all sorts of different sports. Anyway, we're going to go back to that breaking news that we brought you just a little moment ago. The BBC is now asking their former newsreader, Huw Edwards, to return the salary paid to him since his arrest back in November.
The broadcaster's board says he undermines trust in the corporation as they believe he acted in bad faith, knowing he'd plead guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children.
Well, joining us now is former BBC correspondent Michael Cole. Michael, the BBC attempting, I guess, to get on the front foot with this, talking about how Huw Edwards essentially deceived them by not mentioning that he was going to plead guilty to these accusations against him. What should we make of it all, Michael?
Good afternoon, Emily. Good afternoon, Cameron. If Huw Edwards has a single shred of decency left, he will repay that money, £200,000, with alacrity, adding his apologies to his former colleagues at the BBC who have been appalled by the revelations. If we go back to November, as you've mentioned, he was arrested. The Director General and the head of news knew he'd been arrested, although the rest of the BBC did not. Under the terms of his freelance contract, there will have been a clause in which he undertook never to bring the BBC into disrepute by anything he said or did. The Director General and the Head of News would have been perfectly entitled to ask him, have you breached that clause? Have you brought the corporation into disrepute? And being a chapel-going, God-fearing man, as he advertises himself over the years, he would have, I hope, given them an honest answer, because, as you say, he has pleaded guilty to 3 serious charges just recently. Then, instead of allowing him to carry on working or being paid, working is far from the truth because he hasn't done work for a long time, they should have sacked him. There and then, they'd have been perfectly entitled to sack him for breach of contract. Instead, they continued to pay him for another 6 months, £200,000. And at the end of it, Emily, they allowed him to resign instead of sacking him. It's been abject the way the BBC's handled this from the beginning to the end. And the foot soldiers at the BBC, the people who aren't paid these absurd inflated salaries, which he doesn't earn in any way, shape or form, they will have been appalled by this, and they will have been gratified that the board at last has got their act together and has done something to say, give us the money back. And I would say when the money comes back, give it straight to the NSPCC, because they protect children against people like Huw Edwards.
OK, Michael Cole, former BBC correspondent, thank you so much for your time. We're going to have much more on this story at the top of the next hour.
Yes, indeed. But in other news, migrant numbers, they're reportedly falling very sharply after the last Conservative government curbed family visas.
The number of applications to enter the UK from skilled healthcare workers and students has dropped by more than a third compared to last year.
So, presumably, this could help Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer meet his promise to reduce sky-high levels of net migration that he made in the election campaign. So could he actually cash in a bit on the changes that the Conservatives already made? We're joined now by immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. Ivan, during the campaign, nearly all parties spoke about how immigration is absolutely far too high. Rishi Sunak did implement a number of changes, and we're now seeing the effects now. So Keir Starmer will be able to come out and say, look, immigration is coming down.
I think it's going to be difficult for him because he would have had to point to a policy that he's put in place, which is the reason why it's coming down. Look, if you can't bring your family members as a student, then obviously it's going to come down. Or if you can't bring a family member because you're a social care worker, it's just common sense, isn't it? Because less people will be coming because they can't bring their family members. But you see, there's a slight problem with all this. We have this perception that immigration is a bad thing, that it's not good to have, say, 600,000 net migration. If we look at what these people actually do, they work in our social and care sector. The students bring in about 30 to 40 billion pounds of GDP into our economy. And 95% of those students who bring that money in actually leave at the end of their course. And those that do stay,
Ivan, you can't seriously be saying that we should welcome levels of immigration at, 1.2 million a year, net migration at 600,000. I mean, what country on earth our size could cope with that number year on year on year?
Well, the Emirates, where I'm sitting right now, does exactly that. In fact, 90% of people living here are migrants. So I disagree with you. It's about what do people do when they get there. And the problem was that it wasn't planning by the Conservatives. If you're going to invite 600,000 people extra into your country, then you build some extra houses, you invest more. And remember, these people are not entitled to benefits. They don't cost our NHS a single penny because they pay for it, and they pay their taxes, and they spend money while they're here. It's going to affect our economy, our social care sector, when these numbers come down to such a low figure, and then we're all going to look at each other and say, what did we do?
Such a low figure. I'm sorry. If it's a third less visas, it's not going to be such a low figure, is it, Ivan? Come on.
Well, you say that, but look, have you read the Oxford University migration report?
I've read a lot of stuff from the Oxford University. I don't know which report you're specifically referring to.
Okay, the latest report that come up, migration will naturally come down no matter what we do. And that's what they predicted. Over the next 10 years, the number of people coming to the UK will naturally get less and less. And because I think that there's a perception that immigration is bad, but no one's actually explained to me why.
Ivan, there's no perception that all immigration is bad. It's about the huge sky-high numbers while we've got an acute housing crisis, while we've got community tensions in parts of the country, while you've got all sorts of issues, Ivan. We'll have to leave it there, but I respect your opinion. Ivan Sampson, immigration lawyer, always fantastic to talk to you. We'll leave it there.
Coming up, we'll have lots more still to come.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign, Children and Young People Matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, you know, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, and we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, you know, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, you know, Omar, that happen. You know, children are the ones that are impacted. And, you know, it's, for me, you know, it's really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, you know, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay, from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 10 to 1. A retired British doctor has gone missing in the French Pyrenees, sending a final message to his family saying he had fallen and could not move.
Yes, his last known location was Étang-du-Comté, and he is presumed to be close to Ariège in the Occitanie region of France. Now, as search efforts intensify, his family is urgently appealing for help.
Well, joining us now from Paris is journalist David Chazan. David, thank you for joining us here on GB News. It's a very worrying time, the fact that dogs and helicopters are now involved in this search.
Yes, that's right. And his wife and 2 of his daughters are now in France. And his wife has given an interview on French television saying that the family has not lost hope, but they are extremely concerned. She says that He's somebody who's used to going on hikes and going off for a walk for 2 or 3 hours, but he isn't a mountaineer and he doesn't have mountaineering equipment. And she's concerned because the terrain in this area is quite rugged. And on Tuesday, the day he went missing, and sent those messages saying that he's fallen and couldn't move, and the family tried to contact him on WhatsApp but couldn't get through. Fog had closed in. So the obvious worry is that he may have stumbled, lost his foothold, and fallen.
You mentioned those WhatsApp messages he sent to his family, David. It strikes me as a bit odd that he managed to send messages to his family but didn't manage to call the emergency services.
Yeah, well, I called the local prefecture about this case this morning, and I asked them, and they also found it quite strange. And if he could get through on WhatsApp, why couldn't he have geolocated himself, pinpointed the exact position where he was, and sent that to his family? It is rather odd, yes, but it's possible that he was a bit confused. You see, according to his wife, the last time he was sighted near a lake, the person who saw him said that he appeared tired, but he had told them that he was determined to carry on with his hike. So perhaps he became confused. We just don't know.
And David, sadly, this isn't the first case of a man this summer from Britain having gone missing while hiking solo or going on a walk solo in Europe.
Yeah, that's right. Well, obviously, this case echoes the tragedy of Michael Mosley, who went missing in similar circumstances on a Greek island, and his body was later found. So clearly, we all hope that this one ends more happily than that case did.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time, David Chazan. You are a French journalist in Paris. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we've got lots more to bring you. We'll also be bringing you any updates on Huw Edwards and the BBC's latest statement that he should essentially pay back the money that he's received from the BBC, from the taxpayer, since he was arrested. And, of course, he did plead guilty to these charges.
Absolutely. And continue to send us your views, gbnews.com/your say. We love reading them. We promise to read some out in the next few hours as well. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more still to come and lots of stories to get involved with.
Absolutely, there are indeed. So stick with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. There will be some hot weather pushing into parts of the southeast later this weekend, but for the time being, there'll be some sunny spells in which it's going to feel relatively warm today. That being said, it was a bit cloudy and a little bit damp for some of us first thing. That's because of a front that is now clearing away towards the east, taking that cloud and any rain with it. So across many parts of England and Wales, it's looking dry through this afternoon. Some bright sunny spells, just 1 or 2 showers here. More frequent showers across parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too. Some of them on their heavy side, and some blustery winds here, so those showers rattling through quite quickly. In the north, it's going to feel a little fresh for the time of year, especially with those winds, but elsewhere, feeling warm in those sunny spells. Later on, we'll have more showers across parts of Scotland, still quite blustery here. Elsewhere through this evening and the start of the night, largely dry with some clear skies. But overnight, we are going to have some cloud pushing its way in and some rain feeding into parts of Western England and Wales. A relatively fresh night for eastern parts where we hold on to those clearer skies, milder where it turns cloudier. Through tomorrow then, a bit of a cloudy day across many parts of England and Wales, and there will be some wet weather around. The heaviest rain will be for western hills over parts of Wales and southwest England perhaps. Further north for Scotland and Northern Ireland, similar to today really. Lots of showers around and it is going to be quite blustery. Temperatures will be rising, mid-20s towards the south, but not necessarily feeling that warm because of the thicker cloud. Now, as we go into Sunday, and it does now look a little bit cloudier than it did before, particularly across some parts of central southern England and Wales, and there could be 1 or 2 spots of rain. A bit more sunshine, though, further north over northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and perhaps some sunshine developing across the far south of England as well. But with that, we have some hotter air pushing its way in. So even though there may be a bit of cloud around, temperatures should get into the high 20s. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Alex, can you tell us about Tom Cruise's diet?
Tom Cruise's diet, I mean, so there was the story today in the Daily Mail talking about the fact that obviously, you know, the guy has a very, very strict diet. He pretty much has no alcohol in his diet, has very strict times he eats. He only eats meat and fish.
Isn't happy.
And actually, can I just say, I think this is very depressing. You know, life is short. I don't know why people have, and lots of my friends who go to the gym, they're absolutely obsessed with only having chicken and rice and barely any sauce on it. It's just, what's the point, you know?
You make a good point. Life is short. What do they...
And so is Tom Cruise.
YOLO, you only live once.
Yeah, YOLO.
But then you can live your life as you want to live it. So if you want to live it the healthiest person ever in the whole world, then, you know, that's your one life.
But you raised a great point in the meeting today, which is 64 old anymore? It's not, sort of 62. It's not old, is it?
No.
62 is the new 40.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, though, Tom Cruise is a multi-millionaire. Doesn't he want to just, like, relax and enjoy his life now? Why is he still getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym and eating chicken breast with no sauce on it?
OK, Tom Cruise is another one of these driven people. Tom Cruise is absolutely 100% driven to drive a fighter pilot aeroplane. I mean, how could you actually learn to drive a plane? He is so driven, he is so disciplined, and when you're that disciplined, you know about blood, alcohol, sugar spikes. I bet you he drinks vinegar. Bet you any money he's into gut health. I'm telling you, gut health is in. Everyone's talking about gut health.
But what's the point when you're 62?
No,
I'm hoping when I'm 62 that I'll just chill out.
He doesn't.
No way.
He doesn't need the money
Eat
either.
some
He
donuts.
can just chill. Like,
no, he doesn't want to chill. He so doesn't want to chill. I tell you what, in Hollywood, because my husband's a film producer, in Hollywood, you know, when they retire, they're either 90 or they're dead.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock. I'm Cameron Walker.
And I am Emily Carver. And it's 12 o'clock. No, it's not. It's 1 o'clock.
It is 1 o'clock.
It's 1 o'clock in the
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, Britain. We have lots of stories coming up in the next hour. We've been talking about Huw Edwards and the BBC's board asking him to hand back his salary since he was arrested in November last year. Of course, he was charged and has since pleaded guilty to 3 counts of indecent images of children. We spoke to Michael Cole earlier about that.
Yes, and I believe we are going to be heading as well to Leeds Crown Court because 4 defendants are set to be sentenced, and that will be televised live. That's including for stirring up racial hatred in Facebook posts, also for affray and racially aggravated harassment too. So those are going to be live sentences at Leeds Crown Court. So we'll bring you that too. As we've seen, the criminal justice system is being used very swiftly indeed. We've had, 500 arrests in recent days. We've had over 150 people now charged, people given sentences up to 3 years, I believe, is the longest so far.
And it's not just Leeds. 4 are being sentenced in Liverpool, including Jordan Davis of Southport. He pleaded guilty to possession of a knife. We've got Lloyd Kilner. He pleaded not guilty to violent disorder in Liverpool. Gareth Metcalfe, who pleaded not guilty to violent disorder, and Jimmy Bailey, who also pleaded not guilty to violent disorder in Southport. So lots of sentences, lots of charges.
Indeed. Let's get the headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. At just after 1 o'clock, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Disgraced former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed that 150 of the people arrested in connection with this month's violent disorder have already appeared in court. 118 of those have now been remanded in custody. More than 500 prison places are also being brought online to boost prison capacity. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences expected to be handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable.
Those that are thinking about getting involved in disorder of any sort is very clear. If you involve yourself in disorder, then the full force of the law will be applied. And the fact that we've seen this week people not just in court but being sentenced to significant terms of custody for their behaviour just a few days ago, I think is a very important message to anyone who's thinking of getting involved in the coming days.
An 18-year-old Iraqi national has been arrested in Vienna in connection with the investigation into an alleged plot to attack a Taylor Swift concert in the Austrian capital. On Wednesday, all 3 of the US singer's performances at Vienna's Ernst Happel Stadium were cancelled and 2 others suspected extremists were arrested by local police. The Iraqi national arrested is believed to have come from the same group as the main suspect, a 19-year-old Austrian with North Macedonian roots. The family of a retired British doctor have issued an urgent appeal after he went missing in the French Pyrenees almost 3 days ago. 67-year-old Tom Doherty from St Albans was hiking and camping near Col d'Escaut when his family lost contact with him on Tuesday. A search is underway involving dogs and helicopters. His daughter says the family last heard from Dr. Doherty via WhatsApp. He sent them messages asking for help and told them he'd fallen and couldn't move. Donald Trump has agreed to debate Vice President Kamala Harris on television in the race to the White House. It's been confirmed the Republican nominee will debate his Democratic rival on the 10th of September on the US network ABC. And Trump told a news conference at his Florida home last night that he also wants to add 2 more debates on Fox News and NBC. During his news conference, Mr. Trump claimed his opponent wasn't intellectually up to the challenge.
Any news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference. And I'm sorry, we need smart people to lead this country because our country's never been in this danger before, both economically and from an outside perspective. Russia doesn't respect us anymore. China doesn't respect us anymore. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, liked me a lot. He doesn't like this group.
Russia's defence ministry has confirmed that reserve forces are being sent to the country's western Kursk region, where it still hasn't gained control after a cross-border offensive by Ukrainian troops. Moscow claims Ukraine lost more than 280 military personnel in the past 24 hours, a claim that has not been independently verified. Reports suggest that Ukrainian troops are operating more than 6 miles inside Russia, the deepest cross-border advance by Kyiv since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. Well, the former reality TV star Katy is due to appear in court this afternoon after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and again in March this year. Well, Great Britain's Toby Roberts has won gold in the men's boulder and lead climbing competition at the Paris Olympics. Roberts totalled 155.2 points in the two combined sections to beat Japanese favourite Serato Onruka into second place. The 19-year-old was third after the boulder round, but produced a brilliant lead climb, and his gold was sealed when Onruka fell just 10 points from Roberts' mark. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for the moment. I'll be back in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, OK, welcome back. You're with me, Emily Carver and Cameron Walker this afternoon. So let's catch up on the latest from Leeds Crown Court. Men involved in the recent riots in rival demonstrations are being sentenced.
Not only did you violently attack others in the street, but this was witnessed by people in a nearby bar, on the pavement and in their cars. They will have been shocked, fearful, upset and distressed by your actions. It is for the courts to determine the appropriate sentences for violent incidents of this nature. Given the nationwide context of the violence, and in order to provide punishment and deterrence, in accordance with the overarching principles of sentencing, severe sentences will follow for those who are found to have participated in incidents of violence or incited them. Turning to the offences. On the 3rd of August, there were 2 demonstrations in Leeds outside the art gallery on the Hedgerow. One demonstration was protesting against immigration, the other against racism. That second demonstration had been attended by you and others in your group and in other groups. Both sets of protesters were entitled to protest peacefully. Both are entitled to the protection of the law. After demonstrating, you walked in a group together with others, perhaps in other groups, towards and along Great George Street. What happened next has been captured on CCTV footage. On Great George Street, you encountered 4 white males who had been protesting against immigration. They were walking in the opposite direction in the road, and 2 were wearing Union flags. It is clear that something was said between the 2 groups. It is not clear to me who spoke first, and in one sense it matters little. You, Gaffor, say that you were racially abused. and I accept that that might be so. There was then an outbreak of violence in a public street in the middle of Leeds, and was started by a group with which you were associated. It lasted for around 30 seconds, and it involved punches and kicks by your group towards those whom you had attacked. In other words, the groups came together. A missile was also thrown in the direction of the 4 males, but also towards the bar outside which this violence took place. There were people inside the bar looking out upon the violence. You, Samir Ali, were the second person into the attack. You threw left and right-handed punches towards a bald man, and then you participated in the smaller group by following that group across the road towards the bar. There you confronted a second man, whom you also punched. You then attacked a third man, who was being held by others. Then you returned to the second man. You punched him, causing him to fall to the ground, and then kicked him whilst he was on the ground. Each of the punches thrown towards the first and second men were full force punches. You then walked towards a man who was lying on the ground and kicked him too, before being pulled off by a member of your own group. You walked away down the centre of the road, laughing and congratulating yourself and others in your group, turning towards those whom you had attacked, with your arms out wide as you left through the traffic, which had stopped as a result of the disorder. You, Ghaffar, turned and then ran across the road in order to join in on the violence. You targeted a man who was being restrained by others and aimed punches at his head and body. They appear to have connected. You then walked off, waving to the white males whom you had attacked, inviting further confrontation before leaving. The actions of the two of you are not to be viewed in isolation. This was a group attack involving in excess of 10 men in the circumstances of a heightened state of public concern and anxiety to which each of you have contributed. Those who were attacked were kicked and punched by your group. 2 days later, each of you surrendered yourselves to the police. You were interviewed but made no comment. You have now admitted your guilt. Samir Ali, you are 21 years of age with no other convictions. Adnan Ghaffar, you are 31 years of age. You have a conviction in 2015 for 2 offences of racially or religiously aggravated common assault and causing fear or provocation of violence. On the 10th of April 2024, you were convicted of dangerous driving and driving whilst disqualified and received a term of 20 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. You are in breach of that suspended sentence. You have completed over 1/3 of the hours ordered. I turn to the sentencing guidelines. Samir Ali, I'm satisfied that your offending falls into culpability category A. This was the
That's Judge Guy Curl Casey there at Leeds Crown Court, who is jailing 2 men for an attack on a pro-English Defence League protests after rival demonstrations in Leeds city centre on Saturday. Samir Ali, 21 years old, jailed for 20 months, and Adnan Ghaffar jailed for 18 months, with an additional 12 months for breaching an unrelated suspended sentence.
Yes, so that all relates to what was rival civil demonstrations in the city centre in Leeds just on Saturday. So as you can see, the criminal justice system working very quickly indeed at the moment. But we're going to move on because pressure is growing on the former newsreader Huw Edwards to give up his salary.
Yes, the BBC is now asking Edwards to return more than £200,000 as they accuse him of acting in bad faith. Their board says he undermined trust by taking his wage since his arrest in November, despite knowing he'd plead guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children.
Well, joining us now is former head of religion and ethics at the BBC, Huw Ahmed. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I suppose 2 questions here for you. Should he pay back the money? And second, what's the impact of this on his colleagues at the BBC, former colleagues at the BBC?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I mean, look, I'm speaking here purely in a personal capacity, and I think the BBC have done the right thing. I read what Samir Shah, the chair, said. I think actually, you know, he hasn't acted in good faith, and the fact of the matter is that obviously I think they're right to ask for that £200,000 back from Huw. Whether or not he'll give it or not is up to him, but I think actually they feel that they need to be seen to be doing this, and I think it's the right thing as well. Actually, the public need to see that they take seriously how they spend the licence fee, so it's right that they go and actually have a good conversation, and if it means going to court, I understand. I bet they will want to do that as well, because they have to do something like this. And then your second question as well is, you're right, you know, there are lots of people there are things coming out now about some of Huw's alleged behaviour with younger members of staff, something which, you know, I wasn't aware of at the time, but obviously it's something that's coming out now. You know, I think people who are working in the BBC will want to see their bosses actually doing the right thing, but also they'll be wanting to see an investigation done and actually no whitewashing of that investigation as well. Everything out in the open. Now, knowing Samir, the chair of the BBC, as I do, I'm sure he will want that as well, as will the Director General, who I'm sure doesn't want to kind of like put any of this under the carpet, because I don't think it's possible to. And I think actually, for the good of the BBC, I think they will need to be seen to be doing the right thing as well. And actually, that is trying to get that money out of Huw and not letting any stone unturned. And secondly, actually doing an investigation and having a transparent investigation and making sure that everybody can see and actually read and find out exactly what has happened during Huw's tenure at the BBC.
Huw, just very, very briefly, the BBC board claims that if Huw Edwards had been upfront with the BBC about his arrest, they would not have continued to pay his salary.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct as well, because if he'd been upfront about what actually the actual investigation and allegations were, then I think they would have taken a view that actually, do you know what, this isn't a good use of public money. But actually, because he wasn't, the fact is now they're retrofitting, they're going back in time to say, look, you were not an honest broker with us, you didn't tell us the truth, you knew what you investigated for, you know that this is exactly bringing the BBC into disrepute, and effectively, you know, we would not have paid you had we known that at that time. So I think they're right to go down that road.
Yeah, and the added complexity, of course, this is taxpayer money, of course. Huw Ahmed, thank you very much. You were the former head of religion and ethics at the BBC, but speaking in a private capacity.
Now, the Prime Minister has told the police to stay on high alert as he held another crucial Cobra meeting last night.
And this all comes as he aims to crack down on social media posts and the spread of disinformation online, describing the internet as not a law-free zone.
Well, we're joined now... Oh.
In relation to online and social media, the first thing I'd say is this is not a law-free zone. And I think that's clear from the prosecutions and sentencing. Today we're due sentencing for online behaviour. That's a reminder to everyone that whether you're directly involved or whether you're remotely involved, you're culpable and you will be put before the courts if you've broken the law.
Well, GBNews political editor Chris Hope joins us now. Chris, the Prime Minister suggesting there that he could be a lot tougher on people writing things online.
That's right, Cameron. Hello, Emily, from number 10 Downing Street. Yeah, the Prime Minister is making very clear that, as he said there, social media is not a law-free zone. He says we're expecting more sentencing today of people in trouble for what they've written about last week, about the riots that we've seen across the country this week. I think that course has been picked apart by Elon Musk, who owns Twitter, or X, formerly Twitter, and controversy there. But he says very clearly, if you're directly involved or whether you're remotely involved, you're still culpable and you'll be put before the courts and before the law. This is an area where the Prime Minister is a former Director of Public Prosecutions who ran the CPS for 4 years until 2012. He knows it very, very well, an area he's very confident on. Maybe less confident is on looking at the politics behind this. Why are people rioting? Is it right to call anyone on these marches far right? I interviewed Craig McKinley, now Lord McKinley, the former Tory MP for South Thanet until last month's election. He, of course, is known to our viewers as the Bionic MP, now the Bionic MP who lost his arms and his legs to sepsis. But on the podcast, he went towards who exactly is concerned about migration. And here's what he had to say. You've been following the riots since those dreadful killings in Southport last week, Craig McKinley. Are you comfortable about the blame on the far right? A lot of viewers, listeners to GB News are concerned about the idea that the government's been willing to say it's just the far right. And that almost says if you're worried about immigration, it's a far right issue. And of course, as we know, it's a wider issue and a deeper issue than just one held by some thugs on the far right.
Well, I mean, if the far right are that good at organising things, then they're far better at organising things than any political party or government that I know in the UK. So I actually don't believe fully. I mean, there's always going to be some nutters, and they should be dealt with very robustly, and they should be in prison where appropriate. I'm fully in favour of all of that. But if you look at some of these, rallies that are going on, there are lots of couples on these rallies that you'd expect to go and see in the Dog and Duck on a Friday afternoon. These are normal people, and I think what happened with Southport, it's sort of culminated what I feel is a deep malaise in this country, a deep worry, and it sort of brought it together in an unexpected way. And I'm afraid that's how things often happen. You know, it's like the butterfly wings in Brazil create a storm in Africa. You know, this is almost one of those moments where I think a lot of people have said, forget what the Southport was actually all about. It actually made people rather annoyed about the state of Britain today. I mean, I was so upset about that Southport incident.
I'll move him.
There you are, Craig McKinley, Lord McKinley, saying there are wider, maybe deeper issues behind some of the protests we've been seeing. I should say that Sir Keir Starmer met with his Cobra team last night, his top team of advisors, and he said that the police are on a high alert this weekend because we have to make sure that our communities are safe going into what could be a hot weekend.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope there outside number 10 for us. Now stick with us because after the break we're going to be digging into this social media crackdown or potential social media crackdown. We've already seen arrests on the basis of what you post online. Is there a slippery slope here or is it the right thing to do to crack down on misinformation online? Stay with us.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Karen Stevenson was born in Stoke-on-Trent and read music at Trinity College, Cambridge. She's played cello with many of the world's great orchestras under the batons of some of the most renowned conductors, and she joins me now to discuss her career and the importance of music in education. Tell me about that. What is your role at the Philharmonia?
My role at the Philharmonia is number 2 cello. I've been there for about 15 years. Sometimes I play number 1 cello as well, which is a great opportunity for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I often think what a very difficult life it is to be a professional musician.
I make a living out of it. It is definitely possible. Yeah, we don't really like it when we get into a taxi and someone says, "What's your day job?" Because we work really hard.
I was kind of making the opposite point. Not that you'd also have a day job. I think the perfection that is required for a professional musician is extraordinary. On the whole, we are intolerant of mistakes in classical music.
Yes, we are.
And I just wondered whether you don't become very frustrated with a world in which everything else is imperfect.
You are only as good as your last concert, Michael. That's how it feels. It is a lot of pressure. Sometimes we will say, OK, a pint for every wrong note or something, but if depending on the piece of music, that could be quite dangerous.
How many hours a day do you have to practice?
You have to practice much more when you're younger, I think, when you're learning. I think this is really important. And when you're at music college. I'm a busy, I'm travelling, I have a family. I can't practice as much as I used to, so you have to rely on your experience. What I really wanted to say is that there's been a lot of fear-mongering about classical music being in decline and it not being relevant, and I really wanted to say that I don't think that's the case. Our audiences have increased. They're the highest they've been in 10 years.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:27. Now, the Prime Minister has responded to calls for a crackdown on social media use, and he has warned the public that the online world is not a law-free zone. But is that a threat to free speech?
Yes, indeed, and we have seen arrests during this period as a result of the disorder that we've seen. Arrests relating to things like false communications, malicious content, stirring up racial hatred, inciting violence online, and we want to make sense of it all. And we're joined now by media lawyer Jonathan Code. Jonathan, very interested to get your perspective on all of this, because there appears to be some confusion here about what exactly you are allowed to post online and where exactly it goes over the line of illegality, I guess. What's legal and what's not? We've seen arrests based on potentially sharing information that turns out to be untrue.
Well, I think you may be confusing two issues, if you'll forgive me, Emily.
No, that's fine.
Because I was asked this morning to come on the show, so I've done a bit of homework. So the lady who was responsible, it seems, for the initial post that set the Stockport riots going, it's not her that has been charged. There has been a charge, however, and although it's not said in the news report, BBC News report that's reported it, I've done my homework, and I think the charge must be based on the Malicious Communications Act 1988, Section 1, which makes an offence to post things online, including online, which are grossly offensive. And I think from the sentencing guidelines, it says this can include posting abusive or threatening comments online. And you can get a maximum of 2 years prison for doing that. Now, you're absolutely right that this raises real free speech issues. And I think it's significant that and right that those issues are raised, because we've got to be allowed in a democratic country to speak freely. And it's interesting to talk about this in the context of that sentencing that sentencing judgment that we've just watched from Leeds Court, because prior to that, it was about sort of 10 minutes in all. The judge made the point that that just as protests in the streets have to be kept lawful, so statements online. And he mentioned social media statements. And if you think about it, the power of the social media is such that if you are deliberately setting out via the social media to stir up violence, then it is appropriate the law steps in. The difficult point is where the line is, at what point the law should step in, and at what point should we simply say, well, no, they're just speaking their mind.
See a kind of a relatively new phenomenon even over the last decade or so. And perhaps it's quite easy for you as a media lawyer or us as journalists to talk about what we can and can't say online. As a general point, do you think the general public are educated enough about the online world and the dangers of that words can have when amplified to a potentially global audience of millions?
Well, I don't think they are. And if I may say so, GB News is doing a good job of raising that issue, because I think it's important that they do understand that misusing your mobile phone can create both criminal liability in the way that I've described. And if you think about it, if the riots are being contributed to by people saying foolish and dangerous things online, then it's right that law steps in. As Keir Starmer rightly says, you can't make the social media a law-free zone. But we've also had civil claims for libel based on the use of social media. I brought one successfully on behalf of one of my clients as well. So you've also got to understand, if you take to the social media and you say something thoroughly scandalous and untrue about someone else, then you potentially can get sued for libel as well. So it is worth people understanding that they just have to use these things with a little bit of care.
Yes, Jonathan, and the issue of intent as well, I know also plays out in the law when it comes to online posts. We're going to have to leave it there. Jonathan Code, media lawyer, hopefully we'll speak again soon. It's all very complicated, isn't it, really?
It certainly is. I think it's going to be a very long journey. We've got lots more news still to come, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Mark White.
Good afternoon. It's 1:32. The latest headlines from the GB News Centre. Disgraced former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed that 150 of the people arrested in connection with this month's violent disorder have already appeared in court. 118 of those have now been remanded in custody. More than 500 prison places are also being brought online to boost prison capacity. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences expected to be handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable. At least 10 people have been killed and more than 35 injured after a Russian missile strike hit a supermarket in the Ukrainian town of Kostyantynivka in the Donetsk region. The strike caused a huge fire that engulfed the building with shoppers trapped inside. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted on social media that Russian terrorists had hit an ordinary supermarket and post office. There are, he said, people under the rubble. The former reality TV star Katy is due to appear in court shortly after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and again in March this year. Well, Great Britain's Toby Roberts has won gold in the men's boulder and lead climbing competition at the Paris Olympics. Roberts totalled 155.2 points in the two combined sections to beat Japanese favourite Sorato Anraku into second place. The 19-year-old was third after the boulder round, but produced a brilliant climb, and his gold was sealed when Anraku fell just under 10 points from Roberts' mark. Well, those are the latest news headlines for the moment. We'll have more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again, here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. There will be some hot weather pushing into parts of the southeast later this weekend, but for the time being there'll be some sunny spells in which it's going to feel relatively warm today. That being said, it was a bit cloudy and a little bit damp for some of us first thing. That's because of a front that is now clearing away towards the east, taking that cloud and any rain with it. So across many parts of England and Wales, it's looking dry through this afternoon. Some bright sunny spells, just 1 or 2 showers here. More frequent showers across parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too. Some of them on their heavy side, and some blustery winds here, so those showers rattling through quite quickly. In the north, it's going to feel a little fresh for the time of year, especially with those winds, but elsewhere, feeling warm in those sunny spells. Later on, we'll have more showers across parts of Scotland, still quite blustery here. Elsewhere through this evening and the start of the night, largely dry with some clear skies. But overnight, we are going to have some cloud pushing its way in and some rain feeding into parts of Western England and Wales. A relatively fresh night for eastern parts where we hold on to those clearer skies, milder where it turns cloudier. Through tomorrow then, a bit of a cloudy day across many parts of England and Wales, and there will be some wet weather around. The heaviest rain will be for western hills over parts of Wales and southwest England perhaps. Further north for Scotland and Northern Ireland, similar to today really, lots of showers around and it is going to be quite blustery. Temperatures will be rising, mid-20s towards the south, but not necessarily feeling that warm because of the thicker cloud. Now, as we go into Sunday, and it does now look a little bit cloudier than it did before, particularly across some parts of central southern England and Wales, and there could be 1 or 2 spots of rain. A bit more sunshine, though, further north over northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and perhaps some sunshine developing across the far south of England as well. But with that, we have some hotter air pushing its way in. So even though there may be a bit of cloud around, temperatures should get into the high 20s. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In East Lothian, the A6093 is closed near Ormiston because of a burst water main. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound after an accident between junctions 4A and 5 from the M42 to Droitwich. It's taking around an hour in queues back beyond junction 4. At Bromsgrove in London, the A41 Baker Street in Marylebon's blocked where they're dealing with a fire between Marylebone Road and Paddington Street. They've got 8 fire engines at the scene. Train services are suspended between Marylebone and both Aylesbury Vale Parkway and West Ruislip because of an incident near the railway. On the M26 in Kent, it's taking around 10 minutes in westbound queues approaching the M25 because of roadworks, and in Hampshire the A327 is blocked by an accident between Minley Manor and junction 4A of the M3 at Farnborough, causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Right, OK, welcome back. It is now 1:39. Now, you will remember that on Wednesday night, a Labour councillor was pictured appearing to call for cutting of throats of far-right thugs, or Nazis, he called them. That was in Walthamstow. Let's remind ourselves.
We've got children and women using those trains to steal the summer holidays. They are disgusting, nasty bastards, and we need to cut all their throats and get rid of them all. I just want to say thank you all. I'm going to leave it now. And free! 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 Palestine! Free! Free! Palestine! Free! Free! Palestine! Thank you. God bless you all.
Well, that man has since been suspended by the Labour Party and was arrested by the Metropolitan Police Yesterday, GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters has more on this, particularly about the crowd that was surrounding him.
Yeah, that's right, Cameron. Arrested on suspicion of encouraging murder and another public order offence. But when we brought you that news yesterday, a lot of viewers and a lot of other people were expressing significant public concern about the wider audience reacting to that clip. Because as you've just heard and seen, when Ricky Jones makes those comments about the cutting of throats, there's a lot of cheering, there's applauding, there's a lot of smiles. But crucially, at the end, the microphone is taken from him by a Stand Up to Racism organiser, who we can now reveal is Jo Cardwell, who says thank you for that as she takes the microphone from Ricky Jones. We can also reveal that Jo Cardwell was the chief steward at Wednesday night's Walthamstow rally, so she was organising the event. She did address the crowd before, we believe, those scenes we just showed you. So other footage has been released of her at that event. But also, we've also seen footage of her from the first post-election press conference that Nigel Farage hosted, his first as an MP in central London. She was one of the Stand Up to Racism disruptors who intervened at that event. Now, at the time, Stand Up to Racism, the left-wing activist group, took credit and claimed that disruption, saying that they were distressed by what they described as divisive rhetoric that Reform are putting out and the hate spewed by Nigel Farage.
I remember that. It was very dramatic indeed. I think we actually showed it on this show at the time. She appears to be a bit of a professional protester then.
Well, she certainly does. But Charlie, has Stand Up to Racism commented on the incident yesterday?
They've yet to issue a comment on the cutthroats comment that we saw in that rally. We've also spoken to Amnesty International yesterday. I reached out to them because, as you can see, also in the backdrop of Ricky Jones's address to the crowd, a separate woman in a high-vis jacket is displaying the Amnesty International symbol. So I've asked Amnesty, were you involved in this event? Did you send your organisers to it as well? There were several disparate groups who attended, and yesterday morning, kind of the morning after many of these rallies occurred across Britain, the chief of the Met said that they were a display of unity from communities. That comment came under some criticism because, of course, at some of these rallies, as indeed in Walthamstow, there was tense, sharp, and in this case, violent language being used.
And Jo Cardwell herself also hasn't responded.
She hasn't responded. We reached out to her this morning. She does have a history of left-wing activism, as you've pointed out, Emily. She was also a speaker at a Marxism conference hosted by the Socialist Workers' Party about 8 years ago. So does have a long listing and wide-ranging links with these disparate groups. And we also saw several SWP placards present at that rally when Ricky Jones was speaking. One of them saying, "Smash racism and fascism by any means necessary." With that sort of mentality, perhaps it's no surprise that some cheered when there were calls to cut throats.
Yes, indeed. And, of course, the Labour councillor in question who actually said those menacing words about cutting throats and the like, that's very important indeed, as this is a man who was, up until now, in a position of some power.
Yeah, that's right. And I think since that comment from the Met's commissioner yesterday morning about it being a show of unity, appearing essentially to praise people coming to the streets to demonstrate, that is a concern for the police, especially if two sides do appear, because that can generate quite a lot of hostility and a public order risk. I think there is going to be a move away from some of those comments. We necessarily don't want to see more people take to the streets, be they counter-protesters, demonstrators of either political stripe.
Well, that's the thing, Charlie, because police have had a hell of a job in the last 2 weeks trying to police this, both protesters and counter-protesters, and they have been accused by some of so-called two-tier policing, and yet they have arrested this man in question who allegedly made those comments yesterday. So does this show perhaps they are trying to be equal?
Sure, well, this was considered at the moment when the footage emerged yesterday morning. Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson, both MPs of the Reform Party, saying that this was a key test for the police on those two-tier policing accusations, especially in the hours after Sir Mark Rowley was saying that Wednesday evening's demonstrations were a show of unity from communities. We've also seen earlier in the week a mob descending on a pub in Yardley in the east of Birmingham. That mob masked, some were brandishing weapons, attacking a pub that was hosting a family's karaoke night, but with limited police oversight. When West West Midlands Police's superintendent was asked about this the day after, he said that they had reached out to community leaders who had advised on the style of policing that was required. That added further concerns about this so-called two-tier policing situation. But you have to say, the Met yesterday, they passed that test with flying colours, you say.
There has been some mixed messaging, though, hasn't there? Because you've got, on the one hand, Mark Rowley appearing to praise people for coming out on the streets and showing solidarity, showing unity, and then you've got a cabinet minister this morning on the media round saying, actually, no, stay at home.
Yes.
Stay at home. So there needs to be a bit of a joined-up message there if they're going to prevent people from, you know, trying to take things into their own hands.
I think it's potentially the case that what we saw yesterday, these comments being sourced and shared online of Ricky Jones, this Labour councillor, now arrested on suspicion of encouraging murder, might have had an effect in shifting that communication strategy from the government.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Charlie, for bringing us that update. Charlie Peters, our national reporter. Now, coming up, we're going to have lots more for you on this and on many other things. We're going to catch up with what Keir Starmer is saying, particularly over social media. So stay with us. We're back in a tick. Sorry, we're not doing Taylor Swift then.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It was also announced that the Prince of Wales is set to star in a new two-part documentary on ITV covering his mission to try and eradicate homelessness.
Well, let's talk about this and much, much more with Angela Levin, royal biographer, who joins us in the studio. I'm glad to hear that this documentary's been made, Angela, because I worried that he made this big announcement about homelessness and I thought, goodness me, here is somebody who could maybe do something about this. And then it's all seemed to have gone quiet.
He's been very busy with it, actually. He's gone all over the country to see different areas and how they have been, and to try and change people's attitude to homelessness, that they're people who need help and want to get back into a normal life, and he's there to do it. I mean, we mustn't forget that in, I think it was 2009, he slept out in the street to see for himself what it was like. And he also helps people who are selling the magazine.
Big Issue, no?
Yes, The Big Issue. And he's worked all day long with the same man twice now. So I think he was actually just covering the basic about what it was like for him and how he can now help other people. He and Catherine are putting £3 million straight away into that, and it's going to
Where
be...
Where does that money come from?
Their own foundation, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not taking it from our tax or anybody else's, you know. And there will be a lot more. And he's been getting the money to do this. And I think it's he wants to do this so badly because of his mother. You know, she took them to see people who were homeless.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 1:49 now, and just bringing you the latest line. The former glamour model Katy Price has arrived at the Royal Courts of Justice. That's after being arrested at Heathrow Airport. Now, an arrest warrant was issued by a judge after she failed to attend a hearing relating to her bankruptcies. So there you go. She has arrived at the Royal Courts of Justice after being arrested on return to Heathrow Airport.
Yes, arrested at Heathrow Airport last night, remanded in custody overnight, and here we are, her entering at court.
So, yes, we'll bring you any updates on that when and if we hear them. Now, in other news, Taylor Swift fans have expressed a lot of concern that her concerts might not go ahead in the UK after an alleged terrorist attack was thwarted in Vienna.
2 men were arrested in connection with the suspected plot. Meanwhile, British police have said there was nothing to indicate the events in Vienna would have an impact on her return to the UK next week.
OK, well, to discuss this further, we're joined by former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman. Chip, a reminder that Islamist terror hasn't gone away, but what will our security services and all the relevant authorities be doing to make sure that any concert here in the UK goes ahead without any issues?
Well, the first thing to say is generally there is no clustering in terms of plots in various places. But this is the third we've seen over the summer. So there was, for example, a plot against the Euro final. 3 jihadists were arrested in Potsdam. And there's been a lot of jihadist propaganda about attacking the Olympics, with particularly the Eiffel Tower, with drones going into it. But what you can say in UK terms is that under the contest strategy, the counter-terrorist strategy, the protect part includes crowded places. And counter-terrorism security advisors for many years have had a strategy of making sure that these iconic sites have the protective advice that they need, which of course then needs to be implemented by the venue itself. Now, what is interesting as well is that since 7th of October last year, the UK threat level has remained the same. It's at level 3. It is substantial. So we're at no greater threat in terrorist terms today than we were on the 7th of October. That doesn't mean there's not been more hate crime and extremism, but in terrorist terms, we are no further forward in terms of where a threat might come from. IS and AQ are not out of business, though. They are still in the game, and that's why the security services and counter-terrorist command actively work against them, and why the biggest number of plots is still Islamist, although the right-wing extremism has been growing.
Chip, the Daily Mail is reporting that there may be additional security measures at Wembley Stadium next week for these concerts, including walk-through metal detectors. How effective do you think that would be, if true?
Yeah, that would be something that you would want to do in the inner sanctum. But one of the guys who've been arrested in Vienna said that they wanted to attack the crowd outside because, of course, it's the mass casualty, which is what ISIS want to have. It's sort of terrorism as performative theatre when we're the audience. So it's not just that is good for the inner cordon, as it were, the venue itself. That's the island site in security terms. But you can attack in those sort of number of layers, onion skin layers outside of that. And, for example, the Trooping the Colour has those sorts of arches for people with metal detectors, but you could attack outside that. So you can still have displacement. So that is a good protective security measure, but you could still have displacement. But most venues are very well guarded against this sort of thing.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. Major General Chip Chapman, former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence. Thank you for your time.
We've also had a statement through from Fagan Murray. Now, she is the mother of Martin Hett, who lost his life during the Manchester Arena terrorist attack on the Ariana Grande concert in 2017. She says the terrorism threat facing the UK is substantial, which means a terror attack is likely. We must all be alert and report any suspicious behaviour to the police.
Yes, the foiling of an attack at the Taylor Swift concerts is deeply concerning, she says, and brings back memories of the Manchester Arena attack, which had a similar fan demographic. It's important that terrorists do not succeed and that we continue to live and enjoy our lives. That is why I've campaigned tirelessly to introduce Martin's Law, which is designed to make our public venues safer for everyone. We're going to pick up on that, I think, a little later as well. But coming up in the next hour, we're going to get the latest on the BBC, asking Huw Edwards to return his salary. The chairman has also called him a villain, so stick with us.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your Met Office weather for GB News. Whilst there will be a bit of cloud, a bit of rain around at times tomorrow, it's looking sunnier and hotter for many on Sunday. But for the time being, it is still quite blustery out there, especially across northern parts. There's quite a pressure gradient with an area of low pressure to the north of the UK, and it's this that's driving some breezy conditions. Also, plenty of showers to end the day across parts of Scotland in particular, and some of them could be quite heavy, but rattling through quite quickly because of those brisk winds. Elsewhere, turning largely dry with some clear skies, especially towards the east overnight, but thicker cloud and a bit of rain pushing in from the west. In the west, then, temperatures holding up mid to possibly high teens for some of us. A little bit fresher where we have some clearer skies further east. Now, taking a closer look, first thing tomorrow morning, and across parts of Scotland, it will still be a bit breezy, and there will again be some showers around, perhaps some longer spells of rain for a time, particularly across western Scotland, all of that drifting northeastwards. A few showers perhaps for parts of Northern Ireland and northwest England, a brighter picture for northeast England. Also down the eastern side of England, a good deal of fine sunny weather for some to begin with, but the outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy over the hills towards the west, gradually making their way eastwards as we go through the morning. So for many parts of England and Wales, it is going to be quite a grey day, and there will be a bit of rain at times, though it shouldn't be too heavy for most of us. Further north, a slightly brighter picture, similar to today really, some blustery showers rattling through, though the wind's not quite as strong. In the north, temperatures getting into the high teens, low 20s, mid 20s for some of us towards the southeast. Later on tomorrow, we will start to see the cloud and any rain across England and Wales drifting away towards the east, so some clearer skies developing as we go through the night, and the showers in the north should start to die out as well. And then Sunday for most is looking fine with a decent amount of sunshine, with temperatures rising as we go into Monday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be calling you with the news that you've won our latest Great British giveaway, an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. David from Kent was our last big winner. Listen to what he had to say about getting that winning call.
Hi, I'm David from Kent and I won £15,000 and it couldn't have come at a better time. I was gobsmacked. What have you got to lose for what it costs? In fact, I've done it again this week, so I'd recommend it to anybody.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes and Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 9th of August. I'm Emily Carr.
And I'm Cameron Walker.
The BBC demands payback. The former broadcaster Huw Edwards is asked to return his salary, the one he earned after being arrested on child abuse image charges. The amount reportedly totals over £200,000. Will he give it back?
Keir Starmer responds to calls to clamp down on social media following nationwide riots. He warns the public that the online world is not a law-free zone. Is this a threat to free speech?
And a divided Britain. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, declares he no longer feels safe as a Muslim in London with all the ongoing unrest.
Rioters out early. Ministers are changing the law to allow some criminals to leave prison early to tackle the overcrowding crisis. So some who were jailed for the riot could be released early.
And migrant numbers fall. Applications for skilled worker, health and care, student visas to come to the UK are down by more than a third compared with last year. Will Labour benefit from some of these changes made by the Conservatives? I'm sorry we haven't read too many of your messages out, but we have some time now. And Sheila's got in touch. She says, I'm interested to know what's been going on regarding the illegal immigration issue. Nothing's been mentioned about the boats for some time. She's talking about what's happening day to day in practice. Well, we're hearing that there have been over 4,000 people crossing since Labour came into power. But in the last couple of days, there haven't been because of the weather. Yes. But presumably when the weather gets a little better, it will just continue as normal.
Yes, and if any more do come across on small boats across the channel, we, of course, will keep you right up to date here on GB News. So, Sheila, thank you so much for that message there.
Yeah, and someone else has got in touch. Susan, you say Starmer says social media is not a law-free zone, so he's attacking Elon Musk this way, attacking the users of X and other platforms. What has happened to free speech? Yes, lots of you getting in touch thinking this is a bit of a slippery slope towards some kind of authoritarian crackdown on your freedoms.
I'm getting the sense of Big Brother is watching you a little bit. But, of course, I think maybe the Labour government is very much aware that we live in a democracy. Everybody has the right to say what they would like to say, but perhaps within reason to avoid anyone getting into dangerous territory.
Well, yes, that is true. Where is the line and where should it be drawn? We'll be discussing that after the headlines.
Well, good afternoon. At just after 2 minutes past 2, the latest headlines from the GB News Centre. 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre on Saturday. Leeds Crown Court was shown CCTV footage of a large group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghafoor, who also lives in Leeds, admitted a fray earlier this week. Today, Judge Guy Carroll jailed both men.
In your case, Samir Ali, for the offence of a fray, the sentence is 20 months imprisonment. In your case, Adnan Ghafoor, for the offence of a fray, the sentence is 18 months imprisonment. In addition, you will serve a consecutive period of 12 months for the breach of the suspended sentence order. The total sentence in your case will be one of 2.5 years in prison.
Well, it comes as the Prime Minister issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences being handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable.
Those that are thinking about getting involved in disorder of any sort is very clear. If you involve yourself in disorder, then the full force of the law will be applied. And the fact that we've seen this week people not just in court but being sentenced to significant terms of custody for their behaviour just a few days ago, I think is a very important message to anyone who's thinking of getting involved in the coming days.
Disgraced former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. Russia's defence ministry has confirmed that reserve forces are being sent to the country's western Kursk region, where it still hasn't regained control after a cross-border offensive by Ukrainian troops. Moscow claims Ukraine lost more than 280 military personnel in the past 24 hours, a claim that has not been independently verified. Reports suggest that Ukrainian troops are operating more than 6 miles inside Russia, the deepest cross-border advance by Kyiv since Moscow launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago. Meanwhile, at least 10 people have been killed and more than 35 injured after a Russian missile strike hit a supermarket in the Ukrainian town of Kostyantynivka in the front-line region of Donetsk. The strike caused a huge fire and engulfed the building, with shoppers trapped inside. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posted on social media saying that Russian terrorists hit an ordinary supermarket and post office. There are, he said, people trapped under the rubble. An 18-year-old Iraqi national has been arrested in Vienna in connection with the investigation into an alleged plot to attack Taylor Swift at a concert in the Austrian capital. On Wednesday, all 3 of the US singer's performances at Vienna's Ernst Happel Stadium were cancelled, and 2 other suspected extremists were arrested by local police. The Iraqi national arrested is believed to have come from the same group as the main suspect, a 19-year-old Austrian with North Macedonian roots. The family of a retired British doctor have issued an urgent appeal after he went missing in the French Pyrenees almost 3 days ago. 67-year-old Tom Doherty from St Albans was hiking and camping near Col d'Escaut when his family lost contact with him on Tuesday. A search is underway involving dogs and helicopters. His daughter says the family last heard from Dr Doherty via WhatsApp. He sent them messages asking for help and telling them that he'd fallen and couldn't move. Donald Trump has agreed to debate Vice President Kamala Harris on television in the race to the White House. It's been confirmed the Republican nominee will debate his Democratic rival on the 10th of September on the US network ABC. And Trump told a news conference at his Florida home last night that he also wants to add 2 more debates on Fox News and NBC. During his news conference, Mr. Trump claimed his opponent wasn't intellectually up to the challenge.
In a news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference. And I'm sorry, we need smart people to lead this country, because our country's never been in this danger before, both economically and from an outside perspective. Russia doesn't respect us anymore. China doesn't respect us anymore. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, liked me a lot. He doesn't like this group.
The former reality TV star Katy is due to appear in court shortly after being arrested at Heathrow Airport last night. It comes after a judge issued a warrant following her failure to attend a High Court bankruptcy hearing last month. Price was declared bankrupt in November 2019 and again in March this year. And finally, Great Britain's Toby Roberts has won gold in the men's boulder and lead climbing competition at the Paris Olympics. Roberts totalled 155.2 points in the two combined sections to beat Japanese favourite Sorato Anaruka into second place. The 19-year-old was third after the boulder round, but produced a brilliant lead to secure his gold when Anaruka fell just under 10 points from Roberts' mark. Well done to him. Another gold for Team GB. We'll be back in half an hour with more headlines.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back. It's 10 minutes past 2 and we've got some breaking news for you. Lee Carsley has been named as England's interim head coach ahead of the upcoming Nations League fixtures. That's what the FA has just announced. He replaces, of course, Gareth Southgate, who resigned 2 days after his side lost the final of the Euro 2024 in Spain. And Lee is actually is the England's under-21 boss at the moment, and clearly he won't be very shortly. But I believe the new England squad is due to be named on the 29th of August. So that's an interesting development there in the world of football.
Yes, interesting development. A statement from the FA has confirmed the news. It reads, Lee Carsley has been appointed interim head coach of England's senior men ahead of the start of the 2024-25 UEFA Nations League campaign. Now Carsley will step up from his role in charge of the under-21s, initially for September's fixtures, away to Republic of Ireland and at home to Finland, but with a view to remaining in the position throughout autumn while the FA's recruitment process for a new permanent head coach continues. There's a lot of words.
It certainly was a lot of words. Is football going to come home?
Of course it is. Of course it is. The hope will keep us going. Of course, he replaces Gareth, as you said, Gareth Southgate, who got us to the 2 Euros finals, including that one against Spain, when England sadly lost 2-1. But we don't need to dwell on that. Let's look forward.
Yes, we'll remain positive. Meanwhile, pressures grow on the former newsreader Huw Edwards to give up his salary. The BBC is now asking him to return more than £200,000 as they accuse him of acting in bad faith. Their board say he's undermined trust, but taking his wage since his arrest in November, despite knowing he'd plead guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children.
Well, joining us now is former BBC presenter Danny Kelly. Danny, thank you very much indeed. I mean, when people found out that Huw Edwards had been receiving his very large pay packet, despite everything that's been going on for him and at the BBC, I think most people were quite shocked. This man was on an absolutely enormous salary. Do you think there will be enough pressure on him now to actually think, you know what, I'm going to hand that back?
Who knows? I don't know whether the slime ball that is Huw Edwards has an ounce of humility, embarrassment or shame in his body. Who knows what's going on in his head? What should have happened in November when the BBC were tipped off by the Met Police, I think it was the Metropolitan Police, that he'd been nicked for the child indecent images? They should have just said, look, Huw, we're suspending you without full pay. Now, listen, we know that you're not at this point guilty. You've merely been arrested. You haven't even been charged. But unfortunately, it's not like you've been nicked for drink driving or maybe you've been nicked for having a pack of cocaine in your pocket. This is so serious. We are now stopping payment. And if indeed the charges are dropped or the arrest it turns into a de-arrest, we will, of course, we won't tell anybody. We'll keep it stum because that's what they did until some months later, and then we'll reinstate you and we'll pay you back your dough. I think it's incredibly important for public trust that either he gives them the 200 grand back, but also, Emily, I think that the BBC should go after him. I don't know where he stands in law, whether he is compelled to give him the 200 grand back. When I was a presenter at the BBC, there was a clause in my contract that said if I brought the BBC into disrepute, they could boot me out. Now, obviously, retrospectively, that's what he's done. So I don't know whether they can go after him retrospectively, but I don't know what's going on in his head. I can't put myself in the shoes of someone who sends indecent images of children. So God knows what he thinks is morally right.
Yeah, the BBC has insisted this afternoon that if Edwards was upfront about the charges that were being brought against him, they never would have paid him his salary past November since his arrest. So do you think the board were a little bit blindsided by all of this?
It's my understanding that in November, the police approached the BBC and told him exactly what was going on. So I don't think they were blindsided by anything. Again, I take you back to an earlier point I made. It's so serious. This is one of the most serious crimes that anybody, bearing in mind the history of the BBC and the scandals and the cover-ups and the public perception, I think that they should have said, OK, on this occasion, this is so significant. Unfortunately, and we know that you're unwell because you're being signed off with mental illness. We know you're unwell, Huw, but we are going to have to make a stance. It's so significant. So I don't think anyone was blindsided. The only people that have been blindsided are the public, are the licence fee payers, because, of course, nobody knew anything until recently.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that the BBC have taken this long to issue a statement like this. But we shall see what happens. It'll be interesting to see if there's some kind of legal battle now between the BBC and Huw Edwards over this money. We will find out, I'm sure, in due course. Thank you very much indeed, Danny Cleary. You are a former BBC presenter.
Now, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has told the police to stay on high alert as he held another crucial Cobra meeting last night.
Yes, and this comes as he aims to crack down on social media posts and the spread of disinformation online, describing the online world as not a law-free zone.
In relation to online and social media, the first thing I'd say is this is not a law-free zone. And I think that's clear from the prosecutions and sentencing. Today we're due sentencing for online behaviour. That's a reminder to everyone that whether you're directly involved or whether you're remotely involved, you're culpable and you will be put before the courts if you've broken the law.
Well, GB News political editor Chris Hope joins us now. Chris, your reaction to the Prime Minister's words this morning?
Yes. Hi, Cameron. Hi, Emily. Yeah, I'm here in Downing Street, where the Prime Minister has been working all week, dealing with the riots which broke out after those killings in Southport last week. I mean, he's making very clear that there's no free pass here for anybody. If you're going to tweet things, say things online, you will feel the full force of the law. He says if you're directly involved or remotely involved, you will be put before the courts if you've broken the law. He said also in that clip earlier that we will be seeing some sentencing from people being involved on social media, and that could be, I think, a pause for thought for many people before they hit retweet or they post anything online, because it can get you in some serious trouble. Last night the Prime Minister had his third meeting of this Cobra group of senior advisors, cabinet ministers. Cobra means Cabinet Office Briefing Room. That's where they meet, surrounded by all the CCTV cameras, data. It's all there. He said, be very clear that this weekend he wants the police on high alert. The idea of this surge of thousands of police officers towards where trouble might break out, he clearly thinks that has worked, the Prime Minister, allied with very quick charging decisions and then sentencing. I mean, people are being sentenced just days after trouble broke out around the country, and that is unusual, but it is apparently having some effect of quelling any further disturbances, but they are worried about it. Increasingly, the debate is turning to what's the cause of this, who's to blame, who is protesting. I think many people who follow us on GB News, who watch us and listen to us, they don't like being called far right if they're concerned about immigration. And that was an idea picked up by the former Tory MP Craig McKinley. He's known to our viewers as the bionic MP because he lost his arms and legs to sepsis late last year. He now is going to be a peer in House of Lords. And he spoke to me for my podcast, Chopper's Political Podcast, and here's what he had to say. You've been following the riots since those dreadful killings in Southport last week, Craig McKinley. Are you comfortable about the blame on the far right? A lot of viewers, listeners to GB News are concerned about the idea that the government's been willing to say it's just the far right. And that almost says if you're worried about immigration, it's a far right issue. When, of course, as we know, it's a wider issue and a deeper issue than just one held by some thugs on the far right.
Well, I mean, if the far right are that good at organising things, then they're far better at organising things than any political party or government that I know in the UK. So I actually don't believe fully. I mean, there's always going to be some nutters, and they should be dealt with very robustly, and they should be in prison where appropriate. I'm fully in favour of all of that. But if you look at some of these, rallies that are going on, there are lots of couples on these rallies that you'd expect to go and see in the dog and duck on a Friday afternoon. These are normal people, and I think what happened with Southport, it's sort of culminated what I feel is a deep malaise in this country, a deep worry. And it sort of brought it together in an unexpected way. And I'm afraid that's how things often happen. You know, it's like the butterfly wings in Brazil create a storm in Africa. You know, this is almost one of those moments where I think a lot of people have said, forget what the Southport was actually all about. It actually made people rather annoyed about the state of Britain today. I mean, I was so upset about that Southport incident.
So Craig McKinley there saying that there's a challenge here to the new Labour government. Why are people protesting, concerned about immigration? Much of the blame goes back, of course, on his government. When they were in power, the Tories allowed, a couple of million, I think, over 3 or 4 years to arrive here illegally, and 100,000 or so, nearly that many at least, to arrive here illegally. And I think that's what he's pointing towards that. But now all those issues are on this government, and how they address it over the next few weeks is a big challenge, I think, to Sir Keir Starmer.
And Chris, now, of course, there has been a huge amount of misinformation, disinformation relating to the riots and before the riots as well, that have been accused of sort of stirring up some of this violent disorder. But there's been a lot of calls for the government to crack down on social media. We've heard it from Yvette Cooper, we've heard it from a number of Labour MPs, including Sadiq Khan, who's spoken out about how the regulations as they stand aren't good enough. How does Labour play this one? Because they could be seen as encroaching on, authoritarianism if they go down too hard, surely.
Yeah, Emily, you're totally right, and it goes down to freedom of speech. We have Elon Musk, who owns X, it was called Twitter in the old days, and he's been saying, why are people being arrested or in trouble for making remarks on social media? For Americans, it's almost ridiculous. They have all these, the Constitution, I think, for protecting freedom of speech. In this country, we don't have that, and they're wondering why that's happening. Of course, the government would say, well, you can't incite violence, or put out information out which is wrong to incite a riot, and that's what we're seeing today. It's a freedom of speech debate, I think, which ran through the entire of the last government. There's an online harms act that became law. I mean, whether that can be used or tweaked, or we've heard from other left-wing commentators, why can't we ban Twitter or ban X? I mean, that would be seen as I only imagine that would just mean that people would go into different channels which are less visible, maybe, to the authorities, so that wouldn't help much. I think you've got to go to the heart of this, Emily and Cameron, and tackle the reason why communities feel so upset and want to cause trouble in the way that there have been. And of course, many people are out there who aren't causing trouble, just are concerned about immigration. Also, just while I'm on, I should say that there is already bubbling under is the controversy of releasing prisoners to release pressure on our jails. The government has said that if you serve just 40% of your jail term, many thousands of criminals will be allowed to be released early, and that looks like it will pick up some of the rioters, because no rioters have been jailed for more than four years. If you're less than 4 years, you can be freed early. I think that's going to be an ongoing issue playing out into next month.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Christopher Hope, GB News political editor there outside number 10. This is far harder to, resolve all the many, many issues in society that lead to unrest and the like. Much easier to be seen to clamp down on social media, which is often just a symptom of wider problems, eh?
A fine balance, treading on eggshells, I think.
Yes, well, in a moment, Labour's plans to scrap the winter fuel allowance for pensioners may backfire. We'll tell you why in just a second. Stick with us.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle. promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand, just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster, Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on the
hi.
show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, you know, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, you know, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think, pretty fairly priced products, and even more so, go and see the gardens. You know, as we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist, and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives. Again, down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:26, and we have some breaking news for you now. Charlie Peters, our national reporter, has just joined us in the studio. Tell us, Charlie.
So Ricky Jones, the man who was filmed on Wednesday evening making those comments at Walthamstow at the rally, where he was said to be calling for the cutting of throats of Nazi fascists. The Crown Prosecution Service has said that the Metropolitan Police has been authorised to charge Ricky Jones, aged 57, with one count of encouraging violent disorder. They added he has been arrested and charged within 48 hours, and he is going to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court this afternoon.
OK, Charlie, thank you very much for that update.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll keep you up to date on that as it follows. But moving on, we're going to talk about Labour's plans to cut winter fuel payments, because they may not actually save the Chancellor as much as she'd hoped.
No, by restricting extra support, they were hoping to add £1.4 billion to the Treasury coffers. But a former pensions minister warns many might now be forced to seek other financial support, cutting from the government, actually.
Yeah, this is curious. We're joined now by the former Minister of State for Pensions, Sir Steve Webb. Steve, thank you very much indeed for joining us to talk about this. Is this a case of you take one benefit away and so more people will be incentivised to sign on for a different benefit? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, more or less. So the example we've got is when the free TV licenses used to be paid to everybody over 75, and then the BBC restricted them just to people on pension credit. And what happened then in the weeks that followed was a surge in people applying for pension credit. That's the benefit for low-income pensioners. So because people realised they would only get the free TV licence if they applied for pension credit, they then went out, found out about it and applied for it. And if that happened with TV licences, which affect a minority of people, it's going to affect, the winter fuel payment issue affects potentially all pensioners not on benefit. So the risk is for Rachel Reeves that lots of people apply for pension credit to qualify for the winter fuel payment, and then the winter fuel payment has to be paid and pension credit has to be paid as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading here that the latest statistics suggest that between 720,000 and 880,000 people are missing out on that pensions credit. So if they suddenly start claiming it because they've lost the winter fuel allowance, that's a pretty hefty bill for Rachel Reeves.
That's right, Cameron. And those figures you quoted are the government's own figures. So they have a guess, they have an estimate of how many people who, if they phoned up and claimed, could get pension credit and haven't done so. So they would be entitled if they claimed, and they haven't. And as you say, it's of the order of 800,000 people. So if even just a quarter of those people, I've done some figures based on a quarter of those people coming forward and claiming, then that would wipe out hundreds of millions of pounds of the government's expected savings. And I will, if I may, before we finish, I will give you the phone number, because if anybody's watching and thinks, well, do you know what, I'm struggling to pay my bills, struggling to pay my heating bills, I'd like to claim this pension credit, I will, if I may, give you the short phone number to make sure people do claim what they're entitled to.
OK, yes, please do. But the... what was I going to say? I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. I was thinking about I thought you were going to give us the telephone number there.
Bit of public service here on
that.
GB News. Give us the telephone number, Steve.
I was giving people time to grab a pen, but so it's an 0800 number, so it's 0800 99 1234. Nice easy one to remember. 0800 99 1234. And you can claim over the phone. So although people are often put off by the thought of filling in forms, you can do it over the phone. Get your paperwork together, get your information about your pensions and your benefits and so on. Maybe get a son or a daughter to help you claim. But, it is generally elderly people on a low income who are missing out, and it could be worth literally thousands of pounds a year to them.
And Steve, I'm just imagining an alternative universe where a Conservative government had decided to take away the winter fuel allowance from millions of pensioners. I mean, there'd be a lot of anger. This seems to almost have slipped under the radar. I know there's been a lot going on, and I know it is August, and things are a little bit different in the summer months. But this is an extraordinary policy from a Labour government, is it not?
It is a big impact on a lot of people. So it isn't just affecting a small number of people. It's probably of the order of 9 million pensioners will lose winter fuel payments. And, as you said in your introduction, I was part of the coalition government. I was a Lib Dem in the coalition government. But this policy was looked at then because that government was also looking for savings. And so cutting winter fuel payments was looked at. Taxing them means testing them. And the decision was taken not to do that, partly because of the people we're talking about today. The people who are actually on the breadline could claim benefits and don't, so they lose out. And also the people just above. There's this cliff edge where if you are a pound a week above pension credit levels, you lose your entire £300, £200 winter fuel payment. So to try and avoid those things, that's why previous governments didn't actually do this.
Steve, what are the reasons that pensioners who are very much eligible for pension credit don't choose to claim it?
No, it's a good question, and there are some theories. So sometimes people feel it's stigmatizing to claim, a means-tested benefit. If you're of a generation, that word carries negative connotations. And I would say to people, this is paid for by your taxes. You've spent a lifetime paying tax into the system. It's a legal entitlement. It's designed for you because you have a low income. So there's no shame, there's no embarrassment or anything like that in claiming. Occasionally people think, well, I own a home. I couldn't possibly be entitled to benefit. I own my own home. It doesn't matter. They don't count the value of your home. So there are things like this. People don't like forms. Well, as I've said, you can claim on the phone. So, and people think, oh, it must be for other people, not for me. And I think actually phone up. The worst they can say is, no, we've done the sums, you're not entitled.
Well, so Steve Webb, you might end up costing the Treasury and the taxpayer quite a bit of money with this public service announcement. But there you go. Thank you very much. So Steve Webb, former Minister of State for Pensions. Thank you very much.
Coming up, London Mayor Sadiq Khan says he doesn't feel safe in his own city. We'll have more on that. But first, here is the news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Cameron, thank you very much. The top stories this hour, as you've been hearing that breaking news, former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging violent disorder. It's after he was filmed addressing a crowd at a London demonstration on Wednesday evening, that coming from the Crown Prosecution Service. He's appearing at Westminster Magistrates Court this afternoon. In other news, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. Leeds Crown Court was shown CCTV footage of a large group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghafoor, who also lives in Leeds, admitted a fray earlier this week. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law online, with more swift sentences expected to be handed down today. He said it was a reminder to everyone that whether they're directly involved or remotely involved, those people are still culpable. Disgraced former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards has been asked to return his salary by the corporation's board. It comes after the 62-year-old admitted in court last week to having indecent images of children. 7 of the 41 images were described as being in the most serious category of child abuse pictures and videos. The BBC's board has told him to repay his salary from the time he was arrested in November last year, saying the presenter undermined trust in the BBC and brought it into disrepute. And Lee Carsey has been named as the interim head coach of the England men's football squad ahead of the upcoming Nations League fixtures. Carsey will step up to replace Gareth Southgate, who brought him his 8 years in charge to an end after defeat to Spain in the Euro 2024 final last month. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again, here's your latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. There will be some hot weather pushing into parts of the southeast later this weekend, but for the time being there'll be some sunny spells in which it's going to feel relatively warm today. That being said, it was a bit cloudy and a little bit damp for some of us first thing. That's because of a front that is now clearing away towards the east, taking that cloud and any rain with it. So across many parts of England and Wales, it's looking dry through this afternoon. Some bright sunny spells, just 1 or 2 showers here. More frequent showers across parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too. Some of them on their heavy side and some blustery winds here, so those showers rattling through quite quickly. In the north, it's going to feel a little fresh for the time of year, especially with those winds, but elsewhere, feeling warm in those sunny spells. Later on, we'll have more showers across parts of Scotland, still quite blustery here. Elsewhere through this evening and the start of the night, largely dry with some clear skies. But overnight, we are going to have some cloud pushing its way in and some rain feeding into parts of Western England and Wales. A relatively fresh night for eastern parts where we hold on to those clearer skies, milder where it turns cloudier. Through tomorrow then, a bit of a cloudy day across many parts of England and Wales, and there will be some wet weather around. The heaviest rain will be for western hills over parts of Wales and southwest England perhaps. Further north for Scotland and Northern Ireland, similar to today really, lots of showers around and it is going to be quite blustery. Temperatures will be rising, mid-20s towards the south, but not necessarily feeling that warm because of the thicker cloud. Now, as we go into Sunday, and it does now look a little bit cloudier than it did before, particularly across some parts of central southern England and Wales, and there could be 1 or 2 spots of rain. A bit more sunshine, though, further north over northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and perhaps some sunshine developing across the far south of England as well. But with that, we have some hotter air pushing its way in. So even though there may be a bit of cloud around, temperatures should get into the high 20s. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In East Lothian, the A6093 is closed near Ormiston for repairs to a burst water main. On the M5 in Worcestershire, 2 out of 4 lanes are closed southbound after an accident between junctions 4A and 5 from the M42 to Droitwich. It's taking an hour and a half in queues back beyond junction 4. Bromsgrove in Essex, the A12 is closed southbound between junctions 26 and 25 near Colchester because of a spilt load. There are queues back to junction 27. In London, Baker Street in Marylebone is closed because of a fire. Train services are suspended extended into and out of Marylebone Station in London because of an incident. Hampshire, the A327 is closed each way between Minley Manor and junction 4A of the M4 at Farnborough after an accident causing queues. And in Dorset, the A338 is closed along Wessex Way in Bournemouth between the A35 County Gates roundabout and the Bournemouth West roundabout after an accident causing queues.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2:39 and Dawn Neeson is up next, stepping in for Martin Daubney, who is back next week. Dawn, what's coming up on your show? Hello.
Hey, lovely. Right, we've got a cracking show coming up for you. It's just another tall blonde, just different chromosomes, by the way. Which brings me to one of the stories we're discussing is, did you know that Facebook, this one for you, Emily, Facebook is banned any reference to our XX chromosomes. Can you believe that? I mean...
Sorry, what?
All to do with the Olympic boxing. Obviously, there's a boxing... yeah, absolutely. Facebook are banning XX mention, #XX chromosomes.
Good grief.
Because people are getting upset, obviously. I know. What is the world coming to, Emily? But obviously, there's boxing finals tonight, so we're talking about the boxing. We are also talking on a women theme here. Why do Islamists hate young female pop stars so much? We've got a great lady coming on to talk about that. And my big one today, got me really annoyed, is why are people demonising football fans as all being, yes, that phrase again, far right. With the football season kicking off this weekend, that's going to be the big talking point of the show. Loads coming up. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, Dawn, you're a football hooligan, but you're not far right.
No, I am. Yeah, I've had my moments as a football hooligan, but I am certainly not far right, that's for sure.
Just joking, just joking. Thanks, Dawn. We're looking forward to your show. Some big questions there to be answered. Good stuff that's coming up at 3 o'clock.
Absolutely. Now, even the London mayor is wading in on the riots across the country. Sadiq Khan has declared he no longer feels safe as a Muslim in London. He says despite the anti-fascist demonstrations, many people from minority communities were scared to go out, and the far right isn't going away.
It's really important that we are, not complacent and we're vigilant. I'm really proud of what our police service has done, not just over the last 24 hours, but the last few weeks. Yesterday, more than 1,000 police officers are making sure our communities were safe from threat of the far right. We know from across the country that they're trying to spread violence, racism and hatred. And I'm also proud of Londoners who came together united against racism, Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. We've got to recognise, though, the far right's not gone away.
OK, well, there's Sadiq Khan at Stamford Bridge. But GB News political correspondent Olivia Utley is at City Hall for us today, and she brings us this report.
Yes, Sadiq Khan has done this very powerful interview yesterday where he talked about being a Muslim politician in London and no longer feeling safe. He said he felt triggered by last week's events and suggested that he had hoped that his generation would be the last to experience this sort of racism in the capital. But now he feels as though his children are going through the same experience. It feels as though what's been happening over the past couple of days is that this heated debate, this argument, has shifted from the streets. It now seems as though the government is getting a hold on the riots on the streets to the more political sector. Sadiq Khan has hit out two Conservative politicians and former Conservative politicians, particularly Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, and Lee Anderson, now a Reform MP. And he has suggested that those two politicians have sort of helped to incite the sort of hatred that we've been seeing on the streets in recent weeks. Will Braverman and Lee Anderson hit back? It doesn't feel as though this debate is getting any less toxic. The only potentially helpful thing for Keir Starmer is that immigration is actually going down, legal immigration that is. Now, why is that? That is because of changes introduced by Rishi Sunak's government before they left office in May. Because of changes to the immigration plans whereby people on student visas or care visas can no longer bring dependents over. People on those visas have dipped from over 90,000 last year to less than 60,000 this year. That might give Keir Starmer a bit of a leg up going forwards, but for now it does not feel as though the heat is going out of this debate.
Thank you very much indeed, Olivia Utley. You know, I am sure that Sadiq Khan the fact that he does need so much police protection shows that, you know, his safety is at risk. You have a huge amount of, you know, horrible hatred come his way by virtue of him being a Muslim. That is absolutely true. But there are a lot of Londoners from every background who don't feel safe on a daily basis because of all the violent crime that there is.
And another argument is, of course, Sadiq Khan, as Mayor of London, is a public figure, just like the Prime Minister, just like the royal family. All of them have close police protection because, unfortunately, as a public figure, you are at risk anyway, regardless of what religion you are.
Yeah, very good point. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch about all manner of things. Cameron, I understand people have been getting in touch about our tips on pension credits and the like.
Yes, so this is after a story in The Telegraph which suggests Rachel Reeves' cost-saving measures by taking away winter fuel payments to some pensioners won't actually save as much money as she hopes it will, and that is because people are going to start claiming pension credit instead. We had Sir Steve Webb on earlier talking about that, former Liberal Democrat pensions minister. But Rebecca's been in touch. She says the moral of the story here is to go out and encourage all elderly people to apply for pensions credit to prevent them getting hypothermia. And Claudette says the difference between younger generations and our current older generation is the older generation don't relish applying for benefits due to pride and personal responsibility. That is a good point. I think there is a difference between the older generation feeling very proud and wanting to, you know, keep themselves happy, whereas the younger generation perhaps accepts a bit more help. Sure.
Maybe don't want to put the hand out so much. I'm sure a lot of young people would dispute that, Cameron. But there you go. It's the war of the generations, as always. And just on the Huw Edwards story, Richard says asking Huw Edwards to return the money is a case of shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Yes, the BBC is saying that he should return £200,000 that he was paid since his arrest. Will he? Will he be forced to? Will this become a legal matter? Will he decide that actually, you know what, considering everything, I will hand it back?
Well, I suppose it depends what's in his contract, doesn't it? Because there may well not be a clause in the contract that forces him to do so.
Yes, but keep your views coming in, because coming up, we're going to get an update on the Olympics after Team GB won yet another gold. We'll be back soon. Stay with us.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, to enrich us on the best cheeses and wine to buy, I'm delighted to be joined by the CEO of Inflorescence, Jacinta Madison Wilson. Jacinta, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Also, thank you so much for bringing what is
what a Sunday you're having.
of wonderful... What do we have before us?
So, we've got 3 gorgeous wines to try today. We've got an English sparkling, we've got a beautiful rosé and a dessert wine, and, of course, cheese.
Wonderful.
And paired them all beautifully.
Now, English sparkling wine has had a bit of a renaissance.
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it?
To use a French word to describe English sparkling wine. It's having a bit of a moment in the sun.
Absolutely. I just think it's so exciting that this is right on our doorstep, essentially, an hour out of London, and we're around beautiful vineyards.
The chalk sort of sediment is exactly the same as the Champagne region of France.
Yeah, our soils are really similar. We use the same grape varieties a lot of the time. We make it in exactly the same way as Champagne. Our climate is like Champagne was 40 to 50 years ago. So we're really kind of drinking it blind. You almost wouldn't know that you're not drinking champagne. But it's right here on our doorstep. We can stay local now.
Absolutely marvellous. Well, we've got... So what is the best order to start?
OK, well, we're going to start with sparkling, because all things in life should start with sparkling. I got married a month ago, and this was actually the... Thank you so much. This was the wine I chose to have as our first wine that we served the guests. This is from a winery called Bluebell, which is in Sussex, and I've chosen to pair this with a lovely... kind of the English version of Camembert, which is called Tunworth. It's a very classic pairing of champagne and brie. So we're kind of going to do the English version of that now. Absolutely. Are you ready to get stuck in?
I am so...
OK.
Hang on. Is it cheese first or wine first?
I'd have a little sip of the wine first.
Sip of the wine,
have a little bite of the cheese, and then some more wine. Get it all mixed up in there.
It's like a cheese sandwich.
Exactly.
OK, here we go. Cheers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 2:49. We're going to cross live now to Leeds Crown Court, where defendants are being sentenced for the Southport riot.
Every man and their dog.
Oh, well, the video feed has just been suspended for legal reasons, as you can see if you're watching the television. We'll keep you up to date on that feed. Sometimes they go in and out when various things get mentioned. But here we go. We're back.
Post, you responded, start about 5 bell tonight. Be my boy. But it's all gravy. The initial post received 6 likes. However, it was sent to your 1,500 Facebook friends, and because of your lack of privacy settings, will have been forwarded to friends of your friends. The messages were therefore spread widely, which was plainly your intention. In response to a post questioning why, you wrote, because they're over here, given life of Riley, off the tax us hard-working people earn, when it could be put to use. Come over here, with no work visa, no trade to their name, and sit down and doss, and then there's more people being put out homeless each year. They get top band priority on housing and many more reasons. You were arrested in the early hours of the 5th of August and then interviewed by the police. Your motivation became clear when you informed the police that you had promoted the idea of attacking the Britannia Hotel as a result of anger and frustration at immigration problems in the country. You went on to say that you did not want your money going to immigrants who, quote, rape our kids and get priority, end quote. Although you said that you had no intention of carrying out any act of violence, there can be no doubt that you were inciting others to do so. Otherwise, why post the comment? You expressed remorse, but by that time it was too late. For the offence of publishing written material in order to stir up racial hatred, there are sentencing guidelines which I must and will follow. The maximum sentence is 7 years imprisonment. In terms of culpability, it seems to me that your intention was to incite serious violence, which is a culpability A factor. In terms of the harm caused, I have considered both the harm actually caused and the harm intended to be caused as directed in the sentencing guidelines. You were encouraging others to attack a hotel which you knew was occupied by refugees and asylum seekers. The overall effect of your post was to incite violence towards the building and therefore towards those within the building. It was not only the refugees and asylum seekers who were likely to be affected by your post, but also the hotel managers, the night porters, and those who worked within the hotel. In my judgment, this comes close to harm category 1. However, for the purposes of this sentence, I will treat you as falling into category 2, since there was no direct encouragement towards activity which threatens or endangers life. However, you fall towards the top of Category 2. For a Category 2A offence, the starting point is 2 years imprisonment with a range between 1 and 4 years custody. For a Category 2B offence, the starting point is 12 months with a range of up to 3 years custody. There is an obvious overlap between the ranges. That is deliberate. Your position is aggravated by the timing of your post, namely that it was at a time of social unrest and particular sensitivity across the country. I take account also of the need for increased policing, as I have indicated, partly as a consequence of your post. In mitigation, I take into account your plea of guilty, for which you will receive full credit of 1/3, following your earlier admissions. I take account of the contents of the references from your mother, friend and employer. These can only be of limited value in the current circumstances, as can the contents of the pre-sentence report. I take account too of your expression of remorse, your lack of convictions which are racially aggravated, that you are in employment and you have a partner and family. In passing sentence, I take into account the purposes of sentencing, in particular in relation to this case, punishment and deterrence. As is recognised on your behalf, this offence is so serious that an immediate custodial sentence is unavoidable. Would you stand, please? The sentence that I pass has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect your guilty plea. The sentence is one of 20 months imprisonment. You will serve up to 1/2 of your sentence in custody before you are released on licence. If you fail to abide by the conditions of your licence, you can be returned to prison to serve some or all of the remainder of the custodial term. The victim surcharge will apply and I will make a collection order. Please take him down.
There we are, Jordan Parler, 28 years old, of Leeds, being sentenced there to 20 months in prison. He will serve 1 month in custody before being released on licence. That is following admitting using threatening, abusive or insulting words to stir up racial hatred following the first conviction for posting online in relation to the public order offence.
So there you go. Those were the judge's sentencing remarks there. Do stick with us because it will be Dawn Neeson up next. I'm sure she'll be discussing this as well as many other things, of course, in the news agenda today. You've been with me, Emily Carver, and, of course, Cameron Walker. Thank you very much. And from us, a very happy weekend to you.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could be yours. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
she could have said stump.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Dawn Neeson. In for Martin Daubney, you might have spotted the difference. Different chromosomes, tall, lanky blonde, same thing though. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday out there. You've made it to the weekend, very nearly. Now, former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging a violent disorder after he was filmed saying rioters are disgusting and should have their throats cut. And Sir Keir Starmer's crackdown continues as courts have been kept busy as more violent demonstrators have been sentenced and jailed across the country. And this is including 2 men involved in a counter-protest after a group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men in Leeds. Gosh, it's all happening, isn't it? There are claims that rioters could be banned from going to football matches with the English Football League season that's starting this evening. We'll ask why this particular sport is being dragged into all of this. I'm really angry about this one. And there's the rest of the day's news as well. BBC has asked shamed former presenter Huw Edwards to return the money he was paid after he was arrested last year. Good luck with that. The BBC chairman has branded him a villain who behaved in bad faith. That's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. And you really don't want to be going anywhere. But, as I always say, and I promise this is the case, this is about you. It's not about me or even Daubney when it's here. It's about you and your opinions. And I'm going to read as many out as I can today. I really promise. So send your views and post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/your say. But first, before we get all to the really exciting stuff that's coming up, it's the news headlines with the very, very lovely Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much. The top stories this hour, as you've been hearing, former Labour councillor Ricky Jones has been charged with encouraging violent disorder. It's after he was filmed addressing a crowd at a London demonstration on Wednesday evening, that coming from the Crown Prosecution Service. He's appearing at Westminster Magistrates Court this afternoon. And some breaking news this hour. A man has been sentenced over Facebook posts he made during the riots and violence seen across the country. And he's been jailed for stirring up racial hatred online. 28-year-old Jordan Parler has been sentenced to 20 months in prison. Meanwhile, 2 men have been sent to prison for an attack on what prosecutors described as pro-EDL protesters after rival demonstrations clashed in Leeds city centre last Saturday. Leeds Crown Court was shown CCTV of a large group of Asian men kicking and punching a smaller group of 4 white men. 21-year-old Samir Ali from Leeds and 31-year-old Adnan Ghafoor, who also lives in Leeds, admitted a fray earlier on this week. Well, it comes as the Prime Minister has issued a warning to those using social media to encourage violence and disorder. Visiting the Metropolitan Police Command Centre in central London, Sir Keir Starmer said social media is not a law-free zone. He said the police are actively pursuing those breaking the law